That day, in the royal palace, a grand banquet was held to celebrate a victory and honor Duke Vanderlick. Among the attendees was the beautiful Claris Nocturnal. A guest eagerly tells her friend to look over. All eyes were on the formidable Duke Albert Vanderlick. The women of the court swoon at the sight of him. With him was the serious young boy, Eric Vanderlick. The crowd murmurs that the rumor of their attendance was true after all. They also recalled the unsettling rumor of the boy going to war. Fearful whispers follow the Vanderlicks through the hall. They are rumored to be heartless monsters who use children to win wars. Suddenly, two men turn, startled by an unexpected sound. A small, white-haired baby happily toddles into the banquet hall. The guests are stunned, asking why a baby is present. The baby falls and begins to cry, capturing the attention of Eric, the Duke, and Clarice. An ominous shadow falls over Duke Albert's face. Onlookers cringe in fear, unable to watch what they assume will be a cruel act. But to everyone's surprise, the Duke reveals a golden baby rattle. The crowd collectively gasps in disbelief. Eric picks up the baby, gently scolding him and calling him Theo. Theo simply giggles in response. The adorable child is formally identified as Theodore Vanderlick. Clarice watches the family interaction, completely shocked. She softly reminds someone that she is not their mother. Duke Albert then begins walking directly towards her. An off-screen voice suggests he came to the banquet just to see her. Standing before her, Duke Albert announces that she will become his wife. His sons eagerly agree, declaring she knows their secrets and cannot be allowed to leave. Surrounded by the Vanderlick family, Clarice wonders what will become of her. Her fateful encounter began with the rumor of their attendance at the victory banquet. Before that night, she had visited the Duke Vanderlick estate. A blonde man reported to her that the Duke refused to return their magic stone. The woman with white hair dismisses him, insisting that he leave at once. She knew it wouldn't be easy and resolved to find another way. As she walked, she noted the estate's eerie quiet before a sudden cry of wah-ah broke the silence. Standing at a grand staircase, she realizes it's a baby's cry. She then feels a cursed magic power and knows something is terribly wrong. The dark rumors of the Vanderlicks using children as pawns flash through her mind. Ignoring a desperate warning to stop, she forces her way into a locked room. Inside the cold room, she is shocked to find a crying baby. She is even more stunned to see her family's heirloom magic stone with the child. A hand suddenly seizes her from behind as a voice demands to know who she is. Feeling the cold steel of a sword at her back, she is paralyzed with fear. She closes her eyes, dreading who her captor might be. It is a menacing, faceless figure holding a blood-stained sword, but when she looks again, the Duke is holding a harmless baby rattle, not a sword. Now composed, she explains she came to speak with him about an important matter. The Duke reveals he was drawn to the room by a sudden immense surge of magic. She then notices the baby has quieted, now sleeping peacefully while holding her hand. The Duke looks at her seriously and says they need to talk. The white-haired attendant hastily agrees to her dismissal as Clarice watches, silently pleading for her to wait. The scene shifts to a moonlit parlor where Clarice sits opposite Duke Vanderlick for their discussion. When Clarice asks about the child, the Duke calmly states that the baby is his adopted son. Taking a sip of tea, the Duke remains composed as Clarice internally recalls that he is supposed to be single. She clenches her fist, determined to intervene if the Duke is planning to use the child for some nefarious purpose. Suddenly, the baby's cry echoes through the estate, startling both Clarice and the Duke. The Duke and the blonde man stand helplessly over the baby's carriage as the man wonders what to do. With a look of uncertainty, the Duke holds out a golden rattle towards the crying baby. The baby stares at the rattle, his crying momentarily subsiding. Thwack! The baby smacks the rattle right into the Duke's face. Wah-ah! The baby's wails intensify as Clarice realizes with horror that the child doesn't trust the Duke at all. After the white-haired attendant offers some clearly unhelpful advice, the Duke dismisses her with a stern look. The Duke awkwardly lifts the crying baby, prompting Clarice to shout that he's doing it all wrong. She urges him to be gentle, explaining the proper way to hold an infant. Clarice gently guides the Duke's hands, explaining her experience from running a children's care facility as the baby sweetly holds her finger. She offers her finger for the baby to hold, confident he will calm down soon. The Duke watches her with a surprised and slightly flushed expression. Wah! To Clarice's dismay, the baby begins to cry louder than ever. She feels the same cursed magic as before and frantically looks around, questioning its source. Her eyes widen as a dreadful realization dawns on her. She understands with a shock that the crying baby is the source of the immense magical power. Knowing that an overflow of magic can be fatal, Claris desperately warns the Duke that the baby is in grave danger. The Duke explains the baby releases magic when he cries, and notes she was able to stop him before, leaving Claris at a loss. As the Duke tries to hand her the child, she stumbles back, flustered by his abruptness. Now holding the infant, she feels the overwhelming magic but sees the baby has finally fallen into a peaceful sleep. She looks down with a tender smile at the now calm baby in her arms. Kia. The baby gazes up at her and lets out a happy coo. The Duke delivers a devastating blow, revealing the baby only has 3 months to live, shocking Claris to her core. He admits that he now believes she has a unique gift to soothe the child, who sleeps soundly in her arms. He formally asks her to care for the baby for 3 months while he searches for a way to save him. Claris is left speechless by his unexpected and desperate plea. The Duke then brings up her original request regarding the magic stone they had purchased. He offers her the priceless family heirloom as payment for her services. The beautiful, glowing magic stone rests inside a wooden box, finally within her reach. Holding the baby, Claris has a sudden moment of clarity. The Duke sweetens the deal, offering a salary and anything else she desires in addition to the stone. While weighing the heavy responsibility, Claris looks down at the sleeping baby in her arms. The baby wakes up and reaches for her with a bright, joyful expression. Holding the giggling baby, Claris smiles warmly, her decision made. The scene concludes on an exterior shot of the grand estate. Claris lowers her head for a moment in quiet contemplation. With a bright, resolute smile, she gratefully accepts the Duke's offer. The blonde man approaches the pensive Duke, who asks what he wants. The aide cheekily whispers that this is the perfect chance to marry her and make her the Duchess. The Duke loudly rejects the idea as nonsense, much to the blonde man's amusement and Claris's surprise. Flustered, Claris insists she isn't considering marriage at the moment. The baby beams with pure, innocent happiness. The baby utters his first word, "Ma," stunning the Duke, his aide, and Claris. Pointing to herself in utter disbelief, Claris is completely shocked. The baby continues to smile, overjoyed to have spoken. Pointing to herself, Claris is the picture of utter disbelief. She awkwardly laughs off the baby's word, but the Duke confirms it's the first time Theo has ever spoken. She quickly tries to rationalize the moment, thinking it must be meaningless baby babble. The Duke's expression darkens as he asks if she's calling his son an idiot, scaring her half to death. The blonde aide then leans in, asking if Lord Theodore had just used healing magic on her, leaving Claris baffled. A brief, ethereal image of a beautiful, white-haired woman flashes in someone's memory. The baby rests calmly, in waiting arms. Claris thoughtfully considers the aide's perplexing question. Knowing that healing magic is exceptionally rare, she dismisses the idea that she, with no magic, could ever use it. The aide asks for her cooperation to run some tests, and she agrees without hesitation. He leads her down a grand hall, stopping to announce they have arrived at Lord Theo's room. As they walk, the sheer scale of the estate's interior is on full display. The aide observes aloud that she also seems to be unaffected by Theo's powerful magic. Later, Claris sits at a desk, looking weary as she reflects on the day's events. She begins writing a letter, apologizing for her sudden and unexpected absence. In her letter, she reassures the recipient that His Highness has promised to look after her facility. Goo-goo. A sudden noise from the baby's crib catches her attention. She turns to find Theo crying in his crib. Deciding a change is in order, she tells the baby she'll go find him some fresh clothes. Peeking from behind a curtain, she finds a new outfit. Gaga? Theo's cries quiet down as he looks up at her with innocent curiosity. She responds with a gentle, loving smile. The mood shifts as the serious young Eric suddenly appears, now holding Theo protectively. His sharp, red-eyed glare is fixed on Claris. He suddenly turns and runs with the baby, causing Claris to cry out for him to wait. Claris watches in shock as Eric leaps from a balcony, propelled by a surge of blue magic. But mid-air, the magic sputters and dies, and Eric realizes with horror that they are falling. Watch out, Claris screams in terror from the balcony. In a desperate move, she lunges and catches Eric, leaving her dangling dangerously as he begs her to hold on. Her heel slips, and she panics, praying she doesn't fall. She grimaces, the strain of holding on becoming almost unbearable. Theo watches the terrifying scene, her desperate expression reflected in his wide, tear-filled eyes. A swirl of magical energy envelops them as they plummet towards the ground. Their feet touch down softly, their fall having been safely broken. They sit in the garden below, shaken but unharmed. Eric stares at his hand, wondering why his magic failed, before turning to anxiously ask if Claris is okay. She quickly returns the question, and he's surprised by her concern, assuring her he's fine. Her relief quickly turns to anger as she sternly reprimands him for his reckless stunt. Wah! Startled by the scolding, Theo begins to cry. Claris extends a gentle hand towards Eric, calmly stating that she is the child's caretaker now. The baby instantly quiets, happily sucking on her offered finger while Eric watches in silence. He thinks back on all the caretakers who failed, making Theo's condition worse, convinced she'll be no different. The blonde aide rushes into the garden, relieved to find them all safe after hearing the commotion. Claris finally notices a bloody scrape on her arm from the fall. Eric dismisses her injury, telling her not to worry because it will heal on its own. She silently agrees, used to such minor scrapes from dealing with the children at her daycare. Eric suddenly changes his tone, shouting that it is a big deal, and warning that even a small wound can get infected. The aide looks on, surprised by Eric's sudden and intense concern. Kneeling before her, Eric gently holds her arm as a golden light emanates from his hands, healing the wound. Staring at the golden glow on her arm, Claris wonders in shock if it's healing magic. Eric realizes with relief that the woman must be the Grand Duke's acquaintance. He lets out a surprised wah as Claris blushes, covering her mouth in realization. Claris praises his amazing healing magic, but a flustered Eric insists he can only perform minor spells, unlike his mother. Overwhelmed, Eric abruptly turns and flees as Claris watches him run off. The blonde aide hands Theo to Claris, who kneels and wonders if the man is Theo's brother. Looking utterly drained, the aide thinks he arrived earlier than planned and didn't need to explain anything. Holding the baby, Claris notes the striking resemblance between them. A close-up of Eric's determined red eye reveals his intense focus. Peeking from a doorway, Eric watches Claris as she hopes to get along with him. As Claris prepares a spoonful of carrot puree, Eric's feet are seen rushing towards her. Chomp. He intercepts the spoon meant for the baby, startling Theo with his sudden taste test. Holding a crying Theo, Claris demands to know what he's doing, and Eric calmly replies, "Taste testing." He points an accusatory finger, yelling that she can't win him over with food, and that he knows she's suspicious. "Just watch," he declares before slamming the door, leaving Claris standing outside. With dejected bunny ears, she wonders if she truly seems that shady, as Theo gently touches her cheek. The scene shifts to a bright, sunny day at the Grand Ducal estate. Peeking through a keyhole, Eric vows to protect Theo from both the strange woman and the Duke. He witnesses Claris intimately touching the Duke's face. The boy watches in absolute horror as the two embrace. Slam! He bursts through the doors, shouting at Claris to get away from His Highness. Unleashing a torrent of dark magic, Eric accuses her of trying to seduce the Duke and vows he won't be deceived. A powerful hand grips his arm, and the magic crackles to a halt. The Duke firmly holds Eric's wrist, stopping his magical assault as the boy looks up in shock. Claris watches in alarm as Theo suddenly plunges into the bathwater with a happy splash. The Duke gets completely soaked as the baby gleefully splashes him. The Duke tells Eric not to misunderstand, asserting that he will never be swayed, as Claris happily hums in the background. A flustered Claris thinks to herself that she can't even consider such a thing. She laughs nervously, saying she feels like she's been dumped despite having no such intentions. The Duke sternly reminds Eric that he has no intention of ever marrying, which is why he adopted them. He tells Eric to focus only on protecting Theo, who happily splashes in the tub. Announcing he's going to change, the Duke leaves Theo's care to Claris, who readily agrees. Claris is left standing with Eric, internally cringing at how awkward the situation has become. Eric apologizes for his strange behavior and turns to leave, but Claris calls out his name. She offers him a towel with a warm, gentle smile. Kneeling by the tub, she shows him how to properly dry the baby. Eric looks on in awe as he gently dries a refreshed and happy Theo. Freshly bathed and dressed, baby Theo lets out a joyful, wide-mouthed laugh. Clarice recalls how Theo was crying and splashing wildly when the Duke tried to bathe him. Cradling the now calm baby, Eric skeptically questions if that's true. The word parents makes Clarice think of the smiling children from her old facility. Eric gently kisses the sleeping baby's forehead with a tender expression. Clarice gasps, completely taken by surprise at the heartwarming sight. She flusters, recalling Eric's prideful declaration about being a child of the Duke, and apologizes. Clarice asks Eric if her former shelter is located far from the estate. She smiles, explaining that it's within their territory and would require a carriage to visit. Looking away with a wistful expression, Eric admits he'd like to go there someday. Clarice affectionately pats the head of a blushing and startled Eric. He quickly pulls away, defensively stating that supporting the facility is simply the duty of a noble. A small boy with cat ears runs away from a silver-haired woman. The silver-haired woman giggles, finding the boy's antics amusing. She walks off, pleased that she can give Sir Theo a good report. A harsh voice from below interrupts her as she shouts for them to stop messing around. The man with the goatee continues his angry tirade. He yells that Eric will be unfit to succeed the Duke as the boy stands silently with his sword. The instructor declares Eric will be disqualified as the heir, shocking Clarice. He questions Eric's pride as an heir, warning he will lose everything again, which visibly startles the boy. Clang! The sword falls from Eric's grasp as he stumbles forward in fear. Clarice watches the scene unfold with a look of deep concern. She immediately turns and runs toward the commotion. She runs directly into the Duke, who questions her presence. As she tries to explain, the Duke reminds her that she's Theodore's caretaker. He coldly warns her not to interfere in matters concerning Eric. Startled by his stern command, she offers a deep, flustered apology. The Duke summons her to his office to discuss the matter further. A blonde man advises the Duke to be more expressive, based on what Lady Claris told him. He suggests the Duke should have simply said he didn't want to burden her. The man examines reports on Lord Theo's magic output, amazed by the detail. His eyes widen as he discovers a significant decrease in the magic levels. The Duke sits alone, his expression grim and thoughtful. In another room, Clarice nervously wonders if Lord Eric is all right. Though she's Theo's caretaker, she can't stop worrying and decides to research Eric's magic. She finds Eric studying healing magic in medical books, surprised he's learning it alone. Startled by her appearance, the cat-eared boy stammers a denial. She praises his efforts, calling him amazing, which leaves him blushing and confused. She shares a memory of her own education being taken away by her sister-in-law. Eric listens with a slight blush, taking in her story. Relieved he's okay, she asks to sit and talk, which startles him. The boy flees once again, leaving Clarice sighing in exasperation. The blonde man asks Clarice why Lord Eric studies alone without a teacher. He explains that healing and medicine are considered unnecessary for the future Grand Duke. Clarice voices her concern, believing that such narrow-minded teaching will backfire. The man agrees, revealing that His Highness is also worried. He reveals a tragic truth. Eric and Theo are the orphan children of the Duke's late older brother. A poignant image shows a woman, likely a symbolic mother figure, holding a baby. The scene transitions to the grand exterior of the ducal estate. Back at sword practice, Eric trembles with fear as he holds a blade. With a clatter, he drops the sword in front of his stern instructor. The furious instructor snatches a notebook from Eric, scolding him for bringing it to training. Eric begs for his study notes back, but the instructor calls them the source of his weakness. The instructor threatens to destroy the notebook, as Eric watches in horror. He warns Eric again that he'll be disqualified as the successor. Suddenly, Clarice appears, telling the instructor that he's the one who will be disqualified. Her eyes burn with cold fury. She stands before the stunned instructor and declares him unfit for his position. The tutor sputters in disbelief, identifying himself as Lord Eric's teacher. Clarice's icy glare silences the man's protests. Holding the notebook, she calmly lists Eric's virtues, calling him a brilliant child with rare healing magic. Enraged, the instructor demands to know if she is questioning his methods. Clarice questions the instructor's judgment, but he dismisses her opinion. Enraged, the instructor raises his hand to strike her down. She braces for the impact, clutching the notebook to her chest. A hand intercepts the blow as she opens her eyes in surprise. The Duke has arrived, firmly stopping the attack, shocking Clarice. He declares that he hired her and coldly asks what the instructor intended to do with his woman. The instructor reels at his words, while Clarice and the cat-eared boy blush in shocked embarrassment. Clarice looks down, still flustered by the Duke's protective declaration. The Duke dismisses the tutor, who tries to protest the sudden command. Unsheathing a sword, the Duke presses the blade to the stunned man's throat. He condemns the instructor for trying to harm an unarmed woman. The Duke then accuses him of insulting his house, leaving the man speechless. He lists the man's crimes, spreading lies and embezzling Eric's tutoring funds. Agreeing with Claris, the Duke declares the tutor is officially fired. He then turns and offers a quiet apology to a startled Claris. As promised, the Duke began personally tutoring Lord Eric in swordsmanship. The disgraced sword tutor was forced to leave the mansion shortly after. The scene shifts to a serene conservatory where a blonde man and a purple-haired woman sit. The blonde man explains the Duke is overwhelmed, having spent his life on the battlefield. He admits that he feels the same way about his own new duties. Claris reflects on the joy of being needed, a feeling she hasn't had in years. The blonde man bids Lady Claris farewell, needing to attend to other matters. As Claris waves goodbye, ominous flowers with glowing eyes appear in the garden. She smiles warmly, feeling content in her new role. A happy baby with golden eyes reaches out with a joyful expression. With a magical flourish, beautiful red roses suddenly bloom around them. The purple-haired woman gasps in shock at the sudden floral explosion around the baby's carriage. The Duke arrives, explaining he was summoned for an emergency. He and the blonde man look down into the sunlit conservatory at the scene below. Claris marvels as the happy baby, now wearing a flower crown, is showered in petals. She panics, yelling to the Duke that something is seriously wrong with Lord Theo. The Duke and the blonde man look at each other, confused by her distress. The scene returns to the bright, flower-filled conservatory. Claris, holding Theo, confirms the situation to the Duke and the blonde man. The blonde man explains that the flowers are likely from life-based magic, an impossible feat for a child. The Duke asks Claris if Theo can do it again, but she isn't sure. She excitedly proposes that they might trigger the magic again if they can make him smile. The Duke thoughtfully considers her idea. Startled, the baby Theo looks on with wide, uncertain eyes. Wah! Lord Theo bursts into tears, apparently still scared of the Duke's stern face. Claris turns with a sudden, brilliant idea. The Duke looks perplexed, asking why he has to be the one to do it. She explains he'll be more effective, and steps on his foot to motivate him. He attempts a strained, terrifying smile, asking if this is right. As the baby wails louder, Claris scolds the Duke for glaring. The blonde man stifles a laugh at the Duke's failed attempt at a smile. He whispers to Claris that his grace is being serious, admitting he's never seen him smile. The Duke's pained expression shows he's clearly out of his element. Overwhelmed, Claris tries to comfort the crying baby in the carriage. As she turns to leave, a hand gently stops her. Claris playfully teaches the Duke how to smile. She then shows him how to soften his eyes. Beaming, she tells him he can do it if he tries. He takes her hand, gazing down at her intently. Flustered by his closeness, she stammers an apology. She quickly pulls away, startled by the sudden intimacy. A sweet memory flashes of baby Theo, laughing joyfully. Claris excitedly asks the Duke if he saw Theo's smile. She tenderly holds the giggling baby close. The Duke watches them with a softened expression. He observes the tender moment from afar. The scene shifts to a study where Eric and Claris listen to an explanation. A vision of Theo shows him emanating a powerful, holy aura. Claris asks in surprise if Eric understood the complex explanation. Eric points to a passage in a book, ready to explain. He explains that magic consumes life force and is exceptionally rare. He warns a wide-eyed Claris that overusing mana is fatal. Claris calls him a genius, leaving him flustered as she internally melts. Blushing furiously, he glares in embarrassment. He yells at her to be quiet before running off. As Claris notes, he's fled again. The sun sets over the Grand Ducal estate. Fuming, Eric thinks Claris is too familiar for a mere caretaker. He hears the Duke's voice and wonders why he's in Theo's room. Cautiously, he peeks through the doorway. He sees the Duke smiling softly at Claris, who holds a sleeping Theo. A dark premonition sends him running down the hall. He imagines himself peacefully feeding the baby. But the reality of the Duke and Claris together returns. The Duke's voice calls his name as Eric clutches Theo protectively. Startled from his thoughts, Eric shouts in surprise. Whoops! He makes a mess feeding Theo and quickly apologizes. Claris smiles, reassuring him that it's fine and she'll get clean clothes. Blushing, Eric announces it's time for his sword training and must leave. She wishes him well with a warm, encouraging smile. Holding Theo, she worries that Eric always looks pained after training with the Duke. A deep look of concern crosses her face. She playfully announces her arrival at the training grounds. The Duke and a startled Eric pause their training to look at her. Relieved, she thinks to herself that she was just overthinking things. The Duke suddenly presents Eric with a real sword, shocking the boy. His eyes widen in absolute terror. A sudden scream startles a shocked Claris. The boy trembles uncontrollably, paralyzed by fear. "Lord Eric," she cries out in alarm. The Duke stands before her, sternly asking why she is there. She cleverly claims it's her duty to prevent Eric from worrying Theo, and it works. He asks what happened, and she explains she heard Eric was scolded about the sword. The Duke recalls telling him not to force it, lamenting the current situation. His expression is a mixture of frustration and concern, a memory of a bearded man pointing menacingly. The young, black-haired boy cries out in terror. A hand reaches for a fallen sword. A silver-haired woman kneels to comfort the distraught boy. The woman looks back with a worried expression. She recalls Lord Albert's kind smile, admitting she still doesn't know his brother well. The dark-haired man questions why she would give up on him. The boy explains the lordship changed hands after his father died. The young boy looks up with a blush of shame. The dark-haired man offers a gentle, reassuring smile. The man states he never expected the boy to have sword skills, prompting a protest that it's unfair. The silver-haired woman realizes with a shock that he's talking about her brother. He continues, saying his brother couldn't even wield a ceremonial sword. The woman and the boy are left utterly confused. He reveals his brother was a great lord, but lacked any talent for swordsmanship, so he honed his own skills and fought on the battlefield in his brother's place. He remembers his brother's happy family, thinking his decision seemed fine at the time. The silver-haired woman begins to understand as she looks at the man. She insists he's hopeless with childcare, making baby Theo cry just by looking at him. Holding the boy's hands, she thinks there's no way the Duke could control a child. The Duke gazes down at his young nephew. He explains that brothers make up for each other's weaknesses, telling the boy he has Theo. The young boy looks up, his eyes wide with stunned realization. His face breaks into a radiant, tearful smile. The boy happily plays with his younger brother Theo, showing him a cat doll. Clarice smiles as she brings in toys, and a voice calls her name. The Duke asks Clarice about Theo's upcoming birthday. She's shocked to learn the birthday is next week, a detail the Duke seems unsure of himself. Stumbling in disbelief, Clarice drops the box of toys. An excited Theo reacts to the news of his birthday. The older boy wonders if this means there will be a birthday party. Clarice stands silently as the boy waits for an answer. The older boy sadly says that nobody has mentioned a party. He explains that with no plans, they're missing a key opportunity for nobles to show off. Determined, Clarice declares she will find out immediately. The boy watches as she heads for the Duke's door. Sigh. She returns, defeated, having had no luck. The Duke explains Theo's unstable condition and the mystery of her magic make a party impossible, and she reluctantly agrees. The older boy sadly concludes that they are not allowed to celebrate. Clarice stands in the hall, sensing there's another hidden reason. She recalls the Duke being evasive, refusing to explain further. The older brother notices his younger brother's expression. A teary-eyed Theo looks up, and his brother asks what's wrong. Clarice explains that Theo saw his brother's sadness and grew worried. The older brother pulls Theo into a warm, reassuring hug. Clarice watches the touching moment with a gentle, thoughtful smile. The scene shifts to a bright, sunlit garden trellis. Theo looks downcast, a single tear rolling down his cheek. Clarice looks on with a soft, knowing smile. Eric turns to leave, apologizing that he has something to do as she reaches for him. Holding Theo, she explains to the baby that Eric didn't want her to see his sad face. She wishes they could do something special, even if it's not a grand party. Standing in a grand hall with Theo, she finds a nervous Eric waiting for them. The Duke suddenly appears with his aide, asking what is going on. Startled, Clarice asks the blonde aide if he is leaving, as he explains a small issue arose. Eric steps forward and bravely asks if they can please celebrate Theo's birthday. The Duke looks down with an annoyed expression, hesitating to answer. She clasps her hands together, about to make her case. She recalls a lonely birthday, watching from afar as another family celebrated happily. Turning away, she says she knows the pain of being forgotten on one's birthday. She pleads with the Duke to at least let them have a small celebration, just the three of them. Clarice and the Duke stare at each other in a tense, silent moment. He turns his back on her, seemingly ending the conversation. A surprised Clarice, Eric, and Theo realize their request was granted. They cheer in celebration as Clarice declares, "We did it!" and a happy Theo giggles. Clarice and Eric share a moment of pure, unbridled joy. Surrounded by flowers, baby Theo looks up in adorable confusion. Oh! His eyes sparkle with delight as he's presented with his favorite apple cake. She explains to the children that the cake will be their gift this year. A blushing Eric nervously holds a small, patched-up stuffed dog. He admits the toy was torn, recalling his frantic, comical attempt to sew it back together. He shyly asks if Theo will accept the humble gift as a piece of him. The baby's golden eyes widen in absolute wonder. Theo lets out a squeal of pure happiness, clutching his new toy. Eric beams, overjoyed by his little brother's reaction. Wiping away a tear, Clarice thinks to herself how cute the moment is. Eric proudly presents the toy again as Theo adorably thanks him for the gift. The Duke and his blonde aide walk down a quiet hallway. They peek from behind a door, observing the happy scene. Clarice, Eric, and Theo are all covered in cake, laughing and enjoying the party. The Duke watches the celebration from the doorway with a cold, distant gaze. His aide asks if he wants to join, but the Duke flatly refuses. Walking away, he declares that such things simply aren't for him. Ooh, wah! Standing over Theo's cradle later that night, the Duke is met with the baby's loud cries. After failing to soothe the child, he pulls out a sparkling blue-jeweled brooch. He offers the glittering jewel to the crying baby. Theo's cries instantly cease as he gazes, mesmerized, at the beautiful object. Clarice looks on in surprise as the Duke attaches the brooch to the baby's clothes. She gives her enthusiastic approval for the unexpected gift. A few days later, a narration reveals research found Theo's dark magic shares properties with the ducal family's unique magic. Unique magic is a rare ability found in only 1 in a billion people. It functions as an extremely potent support ability, and it is unique to each individual user. It is an ultimate magic that is at the pinnacle of support abilities, and it is considered a god-tier ability. There are 2 categories of unique magic, those that are determined at birth and those that are acquired later in life. The acquired types are much rarer, and there is a definite difference in their potential and power. This special magic can only be wielded by those from long-established noble bloodlines. Clarice realizes she never considered having unique magic, since she can't use regular magic at all. The Duke turns to Clarice, seemingly having explained the situation. As they agreed, she confirms she'll return the brooch when her contract ends. A silver-haired man explains that magic stones resonate with the user's unique magical energy. The Duke declares the experiment a success, but his expression hints at a complication. A hand holds up an ornate, sparkling blue jeweled brooch. Clarice explains to the Duke that the brooch's color changes with use, but it will buy them some time. The Duke's blonde aide announces that Lord Theo's personal nanny has returned and introduces her. A woman named Maria introduces herself, explaining she'll now be Theo's nanny and will support Lady Clarice. A flashback reveals Maria, a former knight, also served as Theo's mother's maid and is naturally magic resistant. Clarice welcomes Maria warmly, expressing her relief that she's feeling better. The Duke tells Clarice she'll finally be able to take some time for herself. He notes her non-stop care for Theo, recalling a sweet memory of her cradling the sleeping baby. Clarice looks at the Duke and decides to make a small request. Dressed for an outing, Clarice looks out a window with a serious expression. She touches a golden bird pendant at her neck, resolving to thank Lord Eric as well. Eric is shocked to hear Clarice is leaving for her territory. She confirms it's to research unique magic for Theo's sake. He presents her with a golden bird charm, telling her to take it, leaving a stunned Clarice to recognize the object. A flustered, cat-eared Eric insists he's only lending her the charm, so Theo won't be shocked if she gets hurt. The Duke's blonde aide approaches, asking if she's holding Lord Eric's magic stone. With a wink, the blonde aide shows off his own, similar-looking magic stone. Clarice gazes thoughtfully at the charm, her mind on the term magic stone. A narration explains that a magic stone is a crystal that appears when a person first uses magic. A flashback shows a young Eric creating his stone, as the narration adds that giving one is a symbol of deep trust. Deeply touched, Clarice clutches the precious charm to her heart with a gentle smile. She lovingly examines the golden bird charm. A sudden thought crosses her mind as she looks up in contemplation. She recalls that the first time she ever used magic was a memory reveals a younger her holding a baby, realizing that no magic stone ever appeared. In a carriage, she wonders if she unknowingly used unique magic before but can't remember. Her carriage arrives at a large, welcoming country manor. 3 children from her old facility rush out to greet her with joyful shouts. The children excitedly ask if she's finished with work, exclaiming how much they missed her. She apologetically tells the children that she's actually still working. A boy decides to play with the big brother instead, pointing eagerly at the blonde aide. As the children gleefully overwhelm the blonde aide, Claris silently apologizes to Lord Rusty, vowing to repay his kindness. She walks toward the ornate doors of an office. Now inside, she sits on a stack of books at a large desk, ready to begin her research. She recalls her mother mentioning that all important documents were moved to this estate office. She asks an estate worker named Phi to search for information on unique magic, and Phi agrees. Phi smiles, admitting she never imagined she'd be working for the ducal family. Clarice smiles fondly, thinking of Theo and Eric. A pouting chibi Eric concedes that while he doesn't understand the Duke, he doesn't seem like a bad person. Phi happily reports that thanks to their new support, the facility is doing better than ever, leaving Clarice stunned. Phi expresses her deep gratitude, explaining that Clarice and her late mother saved them. With tears in her eyes, Phi says all they want is for Clarice to be happy, which makes her blush. Clarice walks alone down a sunlit corridor, lost in thought. Seeing a simple, happy drawing of herself from her childhood, she reflects that she thought she was happy here. She pauses in the hallway, clutching her arm as she questions what happiness truly is. Her eyes widen in shock as a sudden realization hits her. Her attention is drawn to a commotion where 2 guards are restraining a young woman, demanding to know who they are. Rusty calls out the woman's name, Annette, as she turns with a bright, cheerful smile. Annette greets her dear cousin, but Clarice's cold inner voice states she doesn't recall sending an invitation. With a chilling glare, Clarice orders her to leave now. Defiantly, Annette loudly declares she is Annette Nocturnal, Clarice's younger sister, the facility's owner, and her sister-in-law. Annette greets Clarice with a wide smile, but Clarice coldly states she wasn't invited and tells her to go home. Annette scoffs at Clarice's authority, taunting her about who she's been associating with while dismissing her guards. A close-up shows Annette stepping forward decisively. Grabbing Clarice's arm, Annette feigns concern, claiming she heard Clarice was searching for the family heirloom. Clarice smiles triumphantly, revealing she made a contract with Duke Vanderlick to retrieve it, shocking Annette. With a nervous smile, Annette expresses surprise that the heirloom ended up in the Duke's possession. Clarice drops the facade, directly accusing a stunned Annette of being the one who sold the heirloom to merchants. Acting wounded, Annette calls her sister cruel and deflects, blaming Clarice for losing the heirloom first. She turns away, putting on a tearful performance. As Annette covers her face and cries, the nearby guards look on with concern. Clarice looks on for a moment, then her expression hardens as she understands Annette's manipulative game. Clarice recalls how elders once took her wealth, and realizes Annette has come to cause trouble once again. A flashback reveals Annette's true nature. While pretending to be close, she systematically took everything from Clarice. In another memory, Annette frames Clarice for ruining a book, turning her teachers against her. Annette is also recalled purposefully bruising herself to falsely accuse Clarice of bullying and win a man's sympathy. While appearing angelic to others, Annette's true expression is a twisted, malicious sneer of triumph. The scene shifts to the exterior of the country manor. Clarice nervously admits to herself that this is her first time ever visiting this facility. Her thoughts drift to the golden bird charm, remembering it was given to her for protection. She recalls a memory of a young, black-haired boy offering her the precious charm. Clutching the charm, Clarice peacefully reflects that the memory gave her strength, even if only for a moment. Her resolve hardened, Clarice challenges Annette to blame her if she wants, leaving her sister flustered. Annette stammers that it's all a misunderstanding, her cheerful mask beginning to crack. Clarice forcefully grabs Annette's arm and spins her around, ignoring her pained cry. She holds up the charm, questioning if this magic stone is the family heirloom Annette is after. Annette calls her stingy and suggests they split the heirloom, whispering that they'll handle the money. Shoving Clarice's hand away, Annette stands defiantly. Annette mockingly asks why Clarice is wearing the heirloom. As she speaks, the golden bird charm on Clarice's chest begins to glow ominously. Annette recoils in shock, her face trembling as she sees the charm's power. Annette internally fumes at Claris for acting cool, before wondering aloud what she means. With a furious expression, Annette summons jagged shards of ice from her hands. Clarice looks up in alarm as the ice crystals hurtle toward her. She panics, realizing that the attack puts the entire facility in danger. The golden bird charm flares with power, cracking as it absorbs a dark energy. As Annette unleashes a massive magic attack, Clarice fears she can't defend against it alone. The charm emits a powerful blue shield, absorbing the dark energy. Kaya, the magic stone, unleashes a shockwave, shattering the ice attack and sending a screaming Annette flying. The magical backlash dissipates, leaving a stunned Annette to wonder what just happened. Clarice looks down at the glowing charm in surprise, questioning its power. A memory of the young boy calling her name flashes through her mind. She brings the charm to her lips, realizing he is the one protecting her now. Annette struggles, recognizing the charm as a high-quality magic stone and gritting her teeth in frustration. A close-up shows Annette's eyes blazing with renewed, malicious determination. From behind a tree, a small boy watches in terror, calling out to Lady Clarice. Annette screams at the boy to get out of her way as Clarice shoves him to safety. Shielding the boy, Clarice is enveloped in a wave of light, realizing a protective spell has been cast. Annette reels back in shock and fury, screaming that her magic was blocked. The Duke's blonde aide, Rusty, appears with a gentle smile as Clarice and the boy look up in relieved surprise. Clarice looks up in shock, asking if he was the one who cast the spell. Standing over her, Rusty confirms he's quite capable of using defensive magic. With a stern glare, Rusty thinks he didn't expect Annette to go so far as to attack a child. Annette furiously tells him not to get cocky, but Rusty cuts her off, telling her not to waste his time. Clarice realizes Rusty is secretly hiding his abilities for emergencies and asks if it's okay for him to be there. With a vision of the Duke behind him, Rusty declares his duty is to protect what Lord Albert wants to protect. Deeply touched by his words, Clarice smiles warmly. Rusty holds up a different ornate charm, asking Annette if she recognizes it. As a stunned Annette recognizes the charm, Rusty reveals the magic stone was a gift from Duke Vanderlick. Rusty smiles knowingly, asking if she, as a noble, understands what that means. With a terrifying expression, Rusty looms over a horrified Annette, warning her not to try anything like this again. He turns back to Clarice with a bright smile, reassuring her that Annette won't be returning. Clarice looks on with a flushed, deeply grateful expression. This scene ends with the small boy happily clinging to her side. In a new scene, a cloaked man approaches a formidable stone fortress at dusk. A scarred man holds a terrified red-haired girl hostage, telling the Duke to meet his demands. As the Duke and his men look on grimly, a group of villagers are shown bound as hostages. A man identified as the hostage's father frantically begs the Duke to save his child, recalling the captor's threat to execute everyone. As a hand chokes the hostage, the Duke confirms the rumors, stating that taking children hostage won't make him hesitate. Surrounded by dark energy, the Duke's eyes glow red as he declares they've underestimated him. Outside the fortress, the captor calls out to the Duke by his name, Albert. Erg. As the hostage struggles, the captor gives the Duke an ultimatum: abandon the child or surrender the magic stone. The Duke remains silent and impassive as an aide calls out his title. A man identified as Knight Commander Marvin announces that the Royal Knights have arrived. Marvin questions the captor's foolishness in picking a fight with the Duke and demanding the ducal family's magic stone. He smiles derisively, asking if they're trying to make the Duke's nasty reputation a reality. The Duke smirks, remarking that Marvin is as talkative as ever. Marvin offers to kill them all on his command, while the hostage's father again begs for his child to be saved. The Duke glares, thinking to himself how he despises being underestimated. A wave of dark magic erupts from the Duke, striking the captors and their men. Marvin watches the insane magic power and concludes there's nothing left for his knights to do. Whoa. As the bound hostage looks on in awe, an aide calls the Duke a monster, and the Duke orders his men to subdue the survivors. Knight Commander Marvin orders his men to move in. A knight reports to the Duke that the other hostage has been located. A young boy cries tears of relief in a tight embrace. The Duke watches the reunion with a soft, gentle expression. An aide kneels to comfort a small, cloaked figure sitting on the ground. The Duke kneels before the cloaked person, asking if they're injured. They quietly respond that they are not. Inside a room, The captured leader and his men are bound and under guard. Marvin identifies the scarred man as the leader, who gives a defiant smirk. The Duke's glowing red eye stares down the leader, stating his life isn't enough to atone, causing the man to panic and claim he was only following orders. A knight bursts in, reporting the discovery of a plan to burn down the entire fort. The Duke grabs the leader by the collar, demanding new information as the man finally breaks, agreeing to talk. Gaia ah! A piercing scream echoes from the foggy castle grounds. Marvin asks the Duke how he knew what was happening, and who the mastermind behind the attack was. The Duke reveals he recognized the magic of the nocturnal county, stunning Claris with the revelation that the boy was abducted from his family's home. Back in the present, Claris reads from a book. Discovering her family's unique magic is the power of purification against curses. The realization hits her. If her magic is working, then Lord Theodore must be under some kind of curse. As she reels from the thought, Rusty informs her from the carriage window that their manor is now in view. Claris urgently calls out for Lord Eric and Lord Theodore outside the grand mansion. Eric holds his younger brother Theodore, both beaming with happiness. The Duke and baby Theodore share a moment of pure, heartwarming joy. The blonde man prompts a blushing Eric, asking if there isn't something he should say first. With a shy blush, Eric quietly announces, "I'm back." The Duke responds with a radiant, joyful smile. He pulls both boys into a loving and emotional group hug. The blonde man gravely informs Eric he has something important to tell him about Theodore. A glass of red liquid is slammed onto a table in a fit of rage. Claris's uncle, Count Nocturnal, menacingly asks what they will do, but a woman declares she still has a plan despite losing the magic stone page. The Count smirks, confident in his malevolent scheme. In a sunlit, ornate room, a voice announces it's time to begin. The household staff and Claris gather to watch as Eric kneels beside baby Theodore. A stunned Eric watches as Lord Theodore shakily stands on his own for the very first time. Claris beams with pure, tearful joy at the sight. A humorous aside shows Theodore performing impossible balancing acts, a testament to his surprising new skills. Eric laughs with immense pride for his little brother's achievement. Claris smiles warmly, reflecting on how quickly children grow up. She marvels at the walking baby, excitedly clapping her hands and calling him amazing. The blonde man transitions to a new topic, as Claris happily asks about the Duke's whereabouts. The Duke's stern voice dismisses the milestone, but an undeterred Claris decides to note it in her report anyway. Claris excitedly suggests that since Theodore can stand, it's time to have his first pair of shoes made. Ugh. The blonde man reminds her they can't summon a shoemaker without the Duke's permission, and Claris sighs in disappointment. A determined glint in her eye, Claris suddenly turns to a surprised Eric. Whoa, taking matters into her own hands, she leads Eric and the blonde man on an outing to the city. She excitedly reflects that this is her first time exploring the town, having been confined to the manor. Back at the manor, a maid assures someone she's watching the sleeping Theodore, while a man confidently states they can count on him. As they hold hands, Eric thinks to himself that for now, he wants her to think only of him. The simple act of holding his small hand sends a jolt through Claris, leaving her blushing and flustered. Inside a shop, she points to a design for a pair of tiny shoes, placing an order. Huh? Claris then happily presents a beautifully wrapped gift box to a very confused Eric. Inside are new shoes for him, and he stammers in confusion as she explains they're for playing with his brother in the garden. She then reveals a beautiful golden accessory. Smiling gently, blushing, Eric begrudgingly accepts the gifts, much to her quiet amusement. Later, Eric surprises a blushing Claris by presenting her with a bouquet of white flowers. The three of them wait together by a large fountain in the town square. A friendly family spots them from the street and waves warmly. Startled by the attention, Claris clutches her bouquet and looks around nervously. The blonde man smiles, announcing that it seems the Duke has returned. They look on as a crowd gathers in the street, all looking in the same direction. The Duke rides into view on horseback, carrying a small, mysterious child in a black hood. Claris stares in shock, a sudden realization dawning on her as she recognizes the child. The hood falls back slightly, revealing a young boy with golden hair and striking red eyes. A nearby voice remarks that this is big news, as Claris and Eric stare in utter shock. "Lord Rusty!" Claris shouts in confusion, but the equally flustered blonde man admits he doesn't know what's happening either. The mysterious boy Rusty remains silent on the Duke's horse. Meanwhile, at the manor, a maid holds a cheerful baby Theodore. Claris, now returned, lovingly takes Theodore into her own arms. She leans in and whispers something to the maid with a look of concern. Elsewhere, the Duke allows himself a small, knowing smile. Holding a happy baby, Claris blushes, thinking the child seems happy. A young black-haired boy with red eyes rushes forward, exclaiming he gave something to Claris. He passionately declares that Claris is already an indispensable part of their lives, leaving her deeply flushed and moved. A hand gently rests on the boy's head, as a man says he heard the details from Rusty. The Duke looks down at the boy with a gentle smile, praising him as well. Claris smiles contentedly as the baby happily plays with the golden bird charm. The mood shifts as the boy looks down sadly and Claris appears concerned. The scene changes to the boy standing beside an older woman named Maria in a grand hall. He's told to greet the guests, the Duke, his aide Rusty, and a young blonde boy. The young blonde boy, dressed in a formal white suit, offers a polite smile. Watching from afar, a shocked Claris realizes it's the boy from before and notes his resemblance to Duke Albert. The black-haired boy looks nervously at the blonde boy, who returns his gaze with a warm smile. The Duke instructs Rusty to show their young guest William around the manor. Rusty leads Lord William down a hallway as Claris watches from the side. As they leave, Claris and the black-haired boy are both stunned, realizing the two boys are brothers. The scene shifts to a woman with long red hair, her back turned as she looks toward a bright light. The black-haired boy nervously tugs on the Duke's waistcoat. Snapped out of her thoughts, Claris apologizes for not listening. She walks through a garden beside a baby carriage, accompanied by the black-haired boy. A narration reveals Claris's interactions with Lord William have been limited to simple greetings. The black-haired boy calls out to a distracted Claris, who sighs, unsure what to say. He apologizes, mentioning that he heard she and his other caretaker were originally cousins. A flashback shows a younger Claris and a girl in a red dress, presumably her cousin. Claris recalls that after realizing they couldn't get along, she felt lonelier with her cousin than she did by herself. A small white-haired baby in a blue hood floats gleefully toward a black cat on a tree branch. Kaya! The baby squeals with excitement. The blonde boy, William, approaches the baby, holding a book. He smiles kindly, bathed in the soft light of the garden. Yeah! The baby excitedly reaches for William, identifying him as Theo, the Duke's second son. The black cat looks on as William notices it. The baby happily imitates a cat's meow for William. The friendly black cat rubs against William as he kneels to pet it. Holding the now crying cat, William gently corrects the baby's rough petting. He shows the baby how to be gentle, and she happily pets the cat as he praises her. William makes a silly, playful face, sticking out his tongue. He dangles his ornate necklace for the delighted baby, thinking how cute she is. With a somber expression, William tells the baby she must be cherished by people. A flashback shows a hooded figure being comforted while recounting being captured by bad people. Returning to the present, a frantic Claris and the black-haired boy run, with Claris shouting for Lord Theo. Yeah! A cat leaps to safety as Claris finds the baby sitting unharmed, expressing her relief. William stands nearby with a serene, knowing smile. Claris and the black-haired boy are seen rushing towards William and the baby. William coldly questions Claris for taking her eyes off the baby, criticizing the Duke's choice of wet nurse. The black-haired boy steps forward, insisting he was the one who lost sight of William and that Claris is not at fault. William leans down, mockingly questioning if it truly wouldn't be her fault. The black-haired boy shouts with fierce determination. Claris looks on in shock, trying to take the blame herself. William laughs as the black-haired boy argues Claris is better than someone who only deceives. William changes the subject, asking someone named Dick if he'd rather be friends with the future Duke. Claris ponders the names William and Dick, certain she has heard them somewhere before. Claris and Eric stare in shock, realizing the identity of their guest. He is introduced as William Hyde Otteron, Prince of the Kingdom of Otteron. Prince William laughs, dismissing the hilarious idea that he's the Duke's secret love child, as Claris mentally apologizes for her assumption. He explains that the Duke's family and the royal family are close kin. The prince declares their family's bond is unbreakable. He cheerfully suggests that they all play together. Surprised, Eric and Claris look on as the prince gestures to them. The prince eagerly runs towards them, ready to play, A flashback reveals the political rivalry between the first and second prince's factions. Many hands reach for a single crown, symbolizing the fight for the throne. Holding Theodore, Claris recalls Lord Albert's warnings about the royal conflict. During a game of tag, the prince complains about Eric's speed, just as Eric lunges, yelling, "Take this!" Whoa. Eric trips and tumbles to the ground mid-lunge. The prince thought allying with the Duke's house was a good idea, but now he's having second thoughts as Eric quickly recovers. Eric picks himself up with a look of renewed determination. He admits he may not be the ideal heir for a warrior's household. With a fierce cry, he rushes forward for another attempt. The prince smugly thinks he can easily dodge the attack, but Eric shouts, "Now!" The prince is stunned as Eric successfully tags his leg. As the flustered prince looks on, Claris smiles warmly, holding a delighted Theodore. Claris, Eric, and Theodore share a tender, happy moment together. Eric beams with pure, blushing joy. The prince and Eric share a laugh, their game having broken the ice. Unseen by the children, the Duke watches them from a doorway. In his study, the Duke tells a subordinate that it's time to make their move. The brown-haired man with a scar bows his head, accepting the Duke's order. The prince apologizes to Eric, admitting his earlier meanness was just a test. He offers Eric a genuine friendly smile. His expression is bright with sincere happiness. He extends a hand, asking Eric to officially be his friend. With cat ears popping out, Eric shouts in surprise, shocking the prince. The prince demands to know why, as Eric explains his duty as the next Duke. Eric states he can't befriend the first prince without the Duke's permission, leaving the prince comically defeated. The prince relents, apologizing and suggesting they be friends as equals. Eric suddenly runs off, leaving a confused prince behind. He scoops up a delighted Theodore, who lets out a happy squeal. The prince watches them with a warm, fond smile. Eric runs through the garden, carrying his little brother, followed by the prince. Claris watches the joyful scene, whispering a prayer of thanks. The Duke's sudden appearance startles Claris as he questions her. He reminds her of his warning not to get too close to the prince. The Duke declares his house will remain neutral and won't take sides. Claris listens to his declaration with a serious expression. Eric looks up at the Duke, arguing it's wrong to dislike someone without knowing them. Claris looks at Eric, impressed by his simple wisdom. The Duke turns and walks away, leaving Claris to ponder the moment. She watches him leave with a thoughtful gaze. The prince waves a cheerful goodbye while standing beside the Duke. Eric sullenly holds a happy, waving Theodore. The Duke and the prince sit opposite each other in a grand, sunlit room. A stern-faced man with black hair and red eyes presents a formal document. In a flashback, a man kneels to comfort a small, distressed figure in a dark hood. Lord William realizes the second prince's faction was targeting his life and the Duke's house. The Duke confirms he's completed William's request, and William thanks him for his discretion. William smiles brightly, thanking the Duke for his help. Holding the babbling baby Theo, the black-haired boy complains that he can't hear anything. The scene transitions down a grand, empty hallway. The boy stumbles backward, bumping into William while still holding the baby. He and a maid quickly run off, apologizing profusely as the Duke watches in confusion. William stands before Claris and the others, asking if they were waiting for him. The flustered black-haired boy insists that baby Theo was the one looking for William. Claris admits she was worried he might scold William, causing the boy to shout her name in embarrassment. William tells the boy their friendship depends on what happens next, and the boy questions if it's because he's a concubine's child. The black-haired boy broods over the queen's dislike for him, thinking of Prince William. Baby Theo looks up, wondering if William truly wants to be king enough to fight his own brother. William stands proudly on the stairs, vowing to fulfill his duty to the country above all else. Claris realizes that the black-haired boy, Eric, would likely step aside if Theo truly wanted the throne. She worries that would mean all of Lord Eric's years of hard work would be for nothing. Memory shows a young, terrified Eric trembling as he holds a sword. Claris watches with a serious, contemplative gaze. Rusty approaches as surprised Claris, presenting a gift from His Highness. She opens the box to find a stunning blue dress, wondering about the sudden gift. Rusty reveals she is to be His Highness's partner, leaving both her and Eric completely shocked. Gazing at the elegant gown, Claris wonders what William's intentions are. She holds up the dress, her expression a mix of shock and confusion. As Rusty explains the situation, Claris reacts with a shocked shout. "Assassination?" He explains the mastermind will be at the party, asking for her cooperation to protect Prince William. Ta-da! A woman with 3 identical guards appears as Rusty introduces them as the night's security, much to Clarice's surprise. Eric staunchly declares he will not accept anyone who tries to blame the Duke. Clarice looks at Sir Eric, deeply touched by his loyalty. With a gentle smile, she accepts the dress. Arriving at a grand masquerade ball, Clarice thinks about how she came with great enthusiasm. Now on the Duke's arm, she feels completely out of place amidst the splendor. As her anxiety peaks, the masked Duke turns his attention to her. She admits to being nervous at her first ball, surprising him since she is a noble's daughter. Confused by his comment, she asks what he means. The Duke suddenly pulls her into his arms, causing a flustered Clarice to cry out his name. Her eyes widen in a state of utter shock. Leaning close, the Duke whispers a single word into her ear. Bingo! A sinister masked man with gray hair is seen smirking from across the room. The Duke cautions her not to look at the man or act suspiciously. He then leads her into a graceful dance across the ballroom floor. A flashback shows a young girl being taught the basic steps of dancing. Clarice recalls practicing alone, having learned to dance purely out of stubbornness without a proper debut. She remembers reaching toward a single spotlight, dreaming of a brighter future. Back in the present, she and the Duke glide across the floor in perfect harmony. The Duke's piercing red eyes watch her intently from behind his mask. Clarice dances elegantly, thinking of His Highness. The Duke states that it's about time and asks her to come with him. She agrees. He unleashes a torrent of dark, thorny magic, his expression grim. The Duke and Clarice stand masked at a formal event. The Duke maintains a stern, watchful gaze. Prince William questions if he and the Grand Duchy are targets. Clarice realizes Lord Albert joined the prince after being framed for his murder. The Duke's expression remains grim and unreadable. She clenches her fist, impressed by the Duke's foresight. A sudden realization makes Clarice gasp in shock. He admits he's surprised, expecting her to disapprove. She states she won't interfere, but a child is still a child. She recalls the children playing happily in the garden. Her expression hardens with renewed determination. A bloody crown symbolizes the ugly political struggle, using a child as a shield. The Duke's lips curl into a faint, knowing smile. The thought of overthrowing family leaves her feeling sick, raising a question. Startled, she wonders if they've already returned. A gloved hand slams down in sudden urgency. Footsteps approach the grand ornate doors. 2 mysterious men in coats and hats enter the room. The Duke suddenly pulls her close, hiding them from view. Pressed against his chest, she panics at their proximity. He holds her protectively, announcing their guests have arrived. The guests are identified as nobles from the second prince's faction. A man identified as Marquis Caldy warns against undignified remarks. A man explains they were worried the first prince would sway the Duke. The Duke presses for any available information. She laments that the masks make it impossible to identify anyone. The man confirms the issue, questioning why the pretend kidnapping has changed. He demands to know how it escalated into an attempted assassination. Clarice recognizes the voice with horror. It's her uncle. The Duke realizes her uncle has sided with the second prince's faction. Marquis Caldy smirks, understanding the situation. He stands, declaring he must now reconfirm the Duke's intentions. He excuses himself, leaving the other nobles behind. They discuss the cleanup, deciding to reconfirm the Queen's will. He sneers that Prince William will simply disappear, horrifying Clarice. One of the plotters reassures his partner, confident in his abilities. A door clicks shut, sealing them inside. The ordeal over, Clarice collapses to the floor, breathless. Trembling, she looks up with a terrified expression. The Duke gently reaches for her, his eyes full of concern. He tells her to leave the politics to him, as she muses a sword is simpler. He softly pats her head in a comforting gesture. She looks up at him with a warm, reassured smile. Recalling her uncle's boast, Clarice's hand tightens into a fist. She resolves that Count Nocturnal must have more crimes to answer for. Returning to the manor, the blonde man asks after Lord Theo. The night deepens outside the grand manor window. Inside, Eric and baby Theo are sleeping peacefully. Peeking in, she finds a sleeping Eric murmuring her name. Overwhelmed by the adorable sight, she squeals with delight. The Duke gently pats a sleeping baby as a memory shows 2 identical babies resting. The baby's tiny hand firmly grips the Duke's sleeve. Realizing the problem, the tired Duke decides he's sleeping in the nursery tonight. In another memory, a sleeping young Eric holds tightly to an adult's hand. The Duke's intense gaze from his unbuttoned shirt leaves a flustered Clarice speechless. Suddenly, William walks in on a chaotic scene as Clarice frantically explains she just came to say hello to the Duke and boys on the floor. The Duke stares forward with a serious expression. A wide-eyed Clarice looks back in stunned silence. She nervously asks if her presence will cause problems, but the Duke simply tells her to do as she likes. Finding the Duke and boys already asleep, Clarice smiles, thinking he must have been exhausted. The Duke sleeps peacefully, his expression serene. Realizing this is her first time seeing him sleep, Clarice turns away, feeling it would be rude to stare. Young Eric sleeps soundly, clutching her hand. Deciding to stay for just a little while, Clarice lies down beside them. The group wakes up in a chaotic tangle of limbs and flying teddy bears. The memory of their peaceful sleeping faces causes young Eric to blush. Ugh, Clarice groans as baby Theo pats her awake. The baby's eyes sparkle with excitement upon seeing her. As the baby babbles, a shocked Eric asks what they think they're doing. The baby flashes a peace sign as Eric warns not to blame him if they're scolded. With a jolt, Clarice wakes up, horrified to realize she fell asleep there. She looks down in confusion as the Duke takes her hand. He holds her hand gently, his eyes still closed. The reality of the situation hits Clarice with a jolt of shock. She leaps to her feet, flustered, wishing him good morning as she tries to flee. The Duke sits on the bed, looking at his now empty hand. He reaches for her, admitting he didn't want to wake up. Rusty teases the Duke about marrying Clarice, noting he's never seen his sleeping face, but the Duke dismisses it as nonsense. The Duke clarifies he only promised to support her, as Rusty wonders how things got to this point. Rusty smiles with a knowing look. In a grand hall, William and Eric kneel on the floor as punishment, while Clarice watches over them. She holds baby Theo, asking the boys if they're all right and promising to care for them. A dark-haired maid interrupts Clarice's thoughts, to which she apologizes for being distracted. The maid reveals that the hand incident was a prank by a lonely Lord Theo. Clarice recalls the Duke holding her hand while she slept. William apologizes on his brother's behalf, but Clarice reassures him that it's fine. She bows her head, also offering an apology. William and Eric both agree to her apology. Eric advises her that if she wants to judge for herself, she needs correct information, just as the Duke taught him. She remembers the Duke asking for Lord Eric's agreement. The memory brings a warm smile to Clarice's face. Eric turns to her, soberly stating that he wants to cut ties with his uncle. William stands by with a smirk, as Eric crosses his arms defiantly. A peaceful image shows the Duke, Clarice, Eric, and baby Theo together as a family. The group gathers around a large map, ready to organize the situation. William explains the country is split between two princely factions, noting the leader of the second faction is his mother, the queen from the kingdom of Legtuas. He reveals the queen was a princess from an enemy nation, married into the family for the sake of peace. He then explains he was born from his mother, a woman from the kingdom of Otteron. William smiles confidently, picturing their awestruck faces. The narration reveals Prince Dick was born after William. Clarice holds the baby, realizing the two princely factions are evenly matched. William gives a knowing, confident smile. He explains that some nobles, like Clarice's uncle, support the enemy queen for profit. A shocked Eric struggles to believe the uncle's betrayal. He reveals the uncle was only expected to use thugs for intimidation. That's it. A sudden realization dawns on William. He declares that the Count is still after the magic stone. William insists they must revise their plan immediately. They present their newly formed plan to the Duke. Eric presents their counterattack plan targeting the Count. The Duke approves, entrusting the boys with part of the strategy. The boys' faces light up with joy and determination. The Duke gives a blushing Eric an affectionate pat on the head. He then offers William a comforting pat as well. William and Eric share a moment of pure, shared happiness. When Clarice voices her concern, the Duke states, "It's time for the boys to gain experience." Rusty reassures her they won't let the children do anything dangerous. Clarice is shocked to hear Rusty praise the Duke's surprising parenting skills. They realize they underestimated the threat to Clarice's magic stone. The Duke announces that Count Nocturnal has requested a visit, stunning Clarice. He smirks, realizing the Count is coming to confirm if the magic stone is real. Rusty smiles, commending the children for their excellent foresight. A few days later, Eric apologizes to baby Theo. The older boys explain they have an important mission to attend to. As Theo babbles sadly, Clarice explains that his brothers have been busy. She tells him that his big brother has an important mission from the Grand Duke. Baby Theo looks thoughtful, murmuring Ellie to himself. His attention is captured by a wooden hobby horse. With renewed determination, the baby crawls forward eagerly. A grand carriage arrives at the entrance of the estate. Count Nocturnal emerges with a self-satisfied expression. Meanwhile, a cheerful baby Theo continues on his secret mission. Claris presents the boys with adorable dolls made in their likenesses. Baby Theo reaches forward, his eyes wide with excitement. Kia! Panic erupts as they realize Lord Theo has opened the door. Claris and a maid rush down the hallway, frantically calling his name. The clever baby hides beneath an ornate table. He peeks out from the very top of the grand staircase. A memory of Eric's warning to hold the handrail flashes by. The determined baby flexes, ready for the challenge ahead. His prize is revealed, a magnificent, glowing apple pie. Theo's eyes sparkle with utter delight at the sight. He peeks through a bush of white flowers, observing his targets. The baby watches as the Count speaks with a blonde man and a maid. The blonde man gives a cold smile, scolding the Count for arriving unannounced. He sighs, recalling that His Highness permitted the Count to enter. The Count sits impatiently, fuming that he is being made to wait. He smirks, believing his plan to test them by arriving early is a success. Count Nocturnal smirks, presenting a small object. Wah! His smugness vanishes as he suddenly tumbles backward. He lands in a heap, shouting in confusion at an overturned drink cart. A shocked Claris stares with wide, disbelieving eyes. Claris tells her maid she thought she heard her uncle's voice, but dismisses it as impossible since he's arriving tomorrow. The maid agrees they must find Lord Theo first. A memory shows a bell on a ribbon, a countermeasure for the crawling baby Theo. In the present, Claris realizes with dawning horror that the bell is gone. From Theo's point of view, a terrifying shadow monster looms as he screams in fear. Eric and William find Theo, with Eric asking why he's there and William wondering if he escaped again. William scolds Theo for escaping, while Eric, now holding him, wonders if the dark scared him. A tearful baby Theo looks up at Eric with wide, innocent eyes. A blushing Eric excitedly asks if Theo just said his name, calling him amazing. William laughs, realizing Theo only escaped because he wanted to see his big brother. Overjoyed, Eric gives his baby brother a warm, affectionate hug. William claps his hands, declaring they'll help Theo with his mission as the baby cheers. Meanwhile, Claris and the maid hear a strange noise, looking worried. They find all three boys fast asleep on the floor, surrounded by their drawings. Eric and Theo sleep soundly, their faces adorably smudged with crayon. Watching them, Claris and the maid cover their mouths, touched by the sweet sight. The Duke, followed by the boys, apologizes to Count Nocturnal for the delay. The Duke fixes the Count with a cold, piercing glare. A promotional image features several dynamic characters. Clarissa's sudden appearance startles a blushing Eric, who calls out her name in surprise. She holds the sleeping baby Theo, who clutches a magical blue bracelet. Eric realizes Theo followed the bracelet's magic, and Claris confirms it keeps him safe. He proudly states he already gave his magic stone to Claris as the group smiles. Clarissa's expression hardens with quiet determination. In a grand library, she senses a strange magical presence, wondering if it's related to her duty. Claris apologizes for interrupting the boys' mission and prepares to leave. A blushing Eric stops her, asking for her help with something. He begins to explain the annual summer festival of light butterflies. He continues, sharing that it's called the Lantern Festival. William chimes in, adding that he's also heard of the festival. The beautiful, magical event is depicted in a glowing illustration. Claris asks how she can help, and Eric reveals there's a children's play she can help with. He looks down with a shy, hopeful expression. Holding the sleeping baby, Claris looks touched by his request. An illustration shows Eric and Theo in adorable butterfly and caterpillar costumes. Eric formally asks for her help practicing, and she enthusiastically agrees to help however she can. His face lights up with a radiant, joyful smile. As Claris smiles, the Duke's hand clenches into a tight, unseen fist. Count Nocturnal fumes, demanding to know if Claris is even paying attention. The tense meeting continues in the grand drawing room. Realizing she'd zoned out, Claris flinches as her uncle gestures angrily. She internally seethes, wanting to shut her uncle up despite being told to stay quiet. The Duke confronts the Count, demanding Clarissa's return, but is reminded of their contract. The Count smirks, pointing out there's less than a month left as Claris looks on in fear. The Duke thinks of the magic stone as a safeguard for his happy family. Clarice looks down, her expression filled with sadness and worry. Eric and William stand together before a set of large, imposing doors. William leans on a somber Eric. A voice calls out to a distracted Eric. The Count reveals Clarice's supposed engagement, shocking her. Eric reacts in wide-eyed shock and fury. William grabs Eric's wrist, holding him back. William warns that intervening will only harm Clarice. William clenches his fist with resolve as Eric watches. Inspired, Eric clenches his own fist in solidarity. The Count declares his wish for Clarice's immediate marriage. Rusty informs the Duke of a border battle. The Duke calmly acknowledges the grave news. Clarice realizes the battle involves the Queen's homeland. Citing an urgent matter, the Duke postpones the discussion. The meeting is brought to an abrupt close. A blond man with blue eyes smiles warmly. The Count gleefully tells Clarice they must catch up. The Count realizes the Duke has left as planned. He concludes that the mansion is now unprotected. The Count explains the carriage is a gift. He reveals a hidden assassin inside the carriage. He's certain his man will find the stone and William. The blonde man directs the Count down the hall. The blonde man stops him with one last comment. He cryptically warns of cursed rooms in the mansion. The Count scoffs at the warning, feigning agreement. He watches the man depart, his intentions hidden. Scoffing at the idea of a curse, he proceeds. Eric confronts the Count, asking who he is. Startled, the Count turns to the unexpected voice. He finds Eric looking up at him innocently. The Count realizes it's the Duke's son, smiling slyly. His shadow looms over Eric as he condescends to him. Believing Eric's directions, he approaches a room. Whoops! He steps directly onto a bar of soap. Ah! He slips and goes flying into the air. Annette swings down, poised to capture him mid-fall. A firm hand pulls a rope, springing the trap. A bucket of purple paint douses the trapped Count. William and Eric watch the chaos unfold in disbelief. The boys cautiously enter the now trashed room. On command, baby Theo presses a large red button. A toy cannon fires, hitting the Count's legs. Both boys scream in synchronized comical horror. Eric laments his poor aim as William notes Theo's ruthlessness. Ugh, the Count lies defeated amidst the debris. A strange substance immobilizes the struggling Count. 3 enchanted suits of armor loom over him menacingly. He lets out a final, terrified scream. He recalls the warning about the cursed room, laughing madly. With the Count defeated, William declares it's his turn. William confidently brandishes a feather duster. Kya! A horrifying monster appears behind Count Nocturnal, who screams in terror. Eric wonders if the Count has given up, and William confirms it seems so. From the floor, the defeated Count is watched by 2 red-eyed figures. William praises Eric's plan, but Eric insists it was William's ghost plan. Baby Theo pokes the unconscious Count, who awakens with a furious expression. The enraged Count shouts at the boys for trapping him, then suddenly grabs baby Theo. Holding Theo hostage, the Count demands the magic stone as William shouts his brother's name. Eric offers a trade, Prince William, in exchange for the baby's safe return. Foo-ha-ha. The Count laughs maniacally, believing he has won. He gloats that the magic stone and the prince's life are finally his. The Duke appears with a sword, knowing people are most vulnerable when they believe they've won. A close-up shows the Duke's stern focus and the jewel on his cravat. Holding his sword to the Count's neck, the Duke muses on the carelessness of victory. His red eyes narrow as he concludes his thought about false confidence. The Count panics, shocked by the Duke's presence, as the Duke orders him not to move. The Count realizes with dawning horror that he has been manipulated from the start. In a flashback, the Duke is informed that a battle has started at the border. Rusty reports that 3 knight units are responding, which the Duke acknowledges. The Duke stands before his assembled knights, ready to give orders. A knight named Marvin declares he will lead the first unit into battle for the Duke. The Duke vows to make those who foolishly started the war feel regret. Yes, sir. 3 young knights shout in unison, their faces full of determination. The Duke has a final word with Marvin before the knight's departure. The Duke confirms their understanding, that the border attack is just a diversion from a Count with little experience. Marvin smiles confidently, ready for the mission. Back in the mansion, Clarice secretly observes the Count and the blonde man. Hiding, Clarice wonders why the Duke is going along with a plan he was opposed to. The Duke suddenly appears before a startled Clarice, addressing her as Your Highness. Claris stares at him with wide, questioning eyes. The Duke offers to use his magic to make them both invisible. She watches in stunned silence as he prepares the spell. A swirl of dark magic envelops them, rendering them unseen. The unsuspecting Count walks down the hallway, tailed by the invisible Duke. The invisible Duke watches as a small boy asks the Count who he is. The Count leans down to speak with the boy, unaware of the shadowy figure nearby. The invisible Claris looks on, a shocked expression on her face. The Duke stands ready, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The boy tearfully claims a cursed soul haunts a room that the second prince was meant to exorcise. Wahahaha! The Count laughs, eagerly offering to help deal with the cursed room himself. As the Count walks away, the small boy watches him go, the first part of his plan complete. The boy clenches his fists, filled with determination. The invisible Duke watches from the shadows as the boy's plan unfolds. In the present, the Duke corners the defeated Count while the children look on. The Count angrily accuses the Duke of abandoning his duty as Northern Protector during a crisis. The Duke coldly dismisses the accusation, stating a mere diversion didn't require his presence. Deep dark, shadowy tendrils suddenly bind the Count tightly. A maid reports from the doorway that all assassins in the castle have been captured. A purple-haired knight stands over the bound assassins as the Count stares, wondering why his plan failed. The bound Count looks on in utter sweating disbelief. The Duke smiles, explaining it was all to give the children real field experience. The Duke stands over the terrified, defeated man, identifying him as Count Nocturnal. Prince William smiles, identified as a royal witness to the entire event. The terrified Count vows to personally report this matter to the king. Ooh-ah! As the Count screams, bound by magic, the children and Claris watch his defeat. A maid silently escorts the hooded and defeated Count away. The Duke calls to a startled Eric, who nervously answers. The Duke calmly critiques Eric's plan, calling it a poor move to introduce an uncertain element. Kya! Nearby, baby Theo lets out a joyful, carefree laugh. The Duke continues, noting Eric's lack of magic control would have allowed an escape. Turning to William, the Duke advises him on the effective use of rumors and covert operations. William stands at attention, nervously agreeing to the lesson. Walking away with a slight smile, the Duke admits to himself that he feels more at ease. Eric and William watch in disbelief, wondering if the Grand Duke actually smiled. In a grand, sunlit hall, a silver-haired woman watches Claris approach. The woman calls out Claris's name with a calm, knowing look. The hooded man from the mansion pleads for help, claiming it's all a misunderstanding. Claris watches him, her expression serious and unreadable. The man nervously awaits judgment, still flanked by the maid. The silver-haired woman confronts him, stating she knows what he did. With an icy stare, she commands him to atone for his actions. The man claims he was deceived, but she scoffs at his shameless excuse. Claris's uncle desperately appeals to their bond, asking if she'll doubt her own family. His words trigger a memory of her brother's belief that families should trust and help each other. Don't tell me you've forgotten, her uncle's voice echoes, as Claris looks haunted by the past. A flashback shows her older brother apologizing to the Duke on behalf of his own younger brother. Her brother kneels before young Claris, expressing his desire to protect his family. He promises to protect her with all his might, and she tearfully vows to protect him too. Back in the present, Claris is lost in painful memories. Her uncle cruelly reminds her of her supposed worthlessness to the Grand Duke's house. Leaning in, he insists her only true allies are her blood relatives and asks for her power. No, Claris shoves him away, decisively rejecting his plea. She turns to see her new family, Eric, William, and the Duke, watching her with concern. Eric passionately declares that true family is built on treasuring one another. Enraged, her uncle reaches for Eric, accusing him of trying to use Claris. Standing protectively before Claris, Eric states that his uncle's version of family isn't family at all. Claris looks at Eric, her eyes wide with surprise and gratitude. She recalls the loneliness she felt after her parents were gone. A cherished memory of her happy, loving parents appears. This is followed by the dark memory of her uncle declaring himself her new father after getting rid of her brother's portrait. She remembers her stepmother selling her mother's tea set and her stepsister claiming her belongings. As she metaphorically drowns, she recalls their cruel smiles, justifying their actions because they were family. But Eric's earnest face breaks through her dark thoughts. Finding her voice, Claris tells her shocked uncle that she always hated him and that he is not her family. Her expression is one of cold, unwavering resolve as she confronts him. Wah! Her uncle refuses to accept her words, shouting that by law, she is his family. He laughs madly, boasting that he has the queen on his side. The unexpected claim leaves Claris completely stunned. William realizes the queen was the true mastermind, but questions why she's being mentioned now. Stepping forward, William coldly asks the man if he truly believes the queen will protect him. Her uncle reveals her fiancé is one of the queen's supporters, stunning Claris. He explains this fiancé is powerful, and offering her will protect her family. From off-panel, an angry voice decries the plan to use Claris like that. Suddenly, the Duke puts a protective arm around a very confused Claris. As a flustered Claris looks at the Duke, Eric and William watch with shocked blushes. The uncle dismisses the scene as ridiculous, but the Duke summons Rusty, who responds immediately. Rusty presents a marriage contract, leaving the uncle shouting in disbelief that it's absurd. The Duke walks away, daring the uncle to find a suitor greater than himself. While the Duke maintains his cold composure, the uncle stammers in utter shock. With a simple command, the Duke has 2 guards seize the defeated man. Later, Claris puts the baby to bed, telling Eric she's glad things worked out. Eric watches Claris with a serious expression as she looks at him nervously. The Duke's voice interrupts them, asking for a word as they look up in surprise. He addresses Claris formally, asking what troubles her and stating his desire to talk. Both Claris and Eric gasp in unison, completely shocked by his formal address. A decorative page marks a brief pause in the story. The Duke reiterates calmly that he wants to talk to her. The scene transitions to a grand, sunlit hall for their discussion. In the hall, Rusty serves coffee to the Duke and Claris. Rusty leans in to speak with a surprised Claris. The Duke and Claris sit in a tense silence across from each other. Picking up his cup, the Duke begins to speak about the matter at hand. He looks at her seriously, stating they need to consider things carefully. She asks if he truly means to marry her, as the children are shown eavesdropping at the door. William shushes a cat-eared Eric while holding Theo, admitting they came to listen. Standing behind them, a smiling Rusty thinks that things are getting interesting. Inside, Claris nervously asks the Duke if he is serious about marrying her. The Duke calmly sips his tea, while a sweating Claris awaits his answer. After a moment of thought, the Duke says, "Ah, I see." In a flashback, he explains that his gesture was simply a lie to silence her uncle. Claris asks about the contract, and the Duke confirms it was a fake that Rusty improvised. In a comical aside, Rusty daydreams about the fake contract becoming real, as the boys stare in disbelief. Claris looks down with a complicated mix of relief and disappointment, murmuring, "I see." She trembles, recalling her uncle's warning that her fiancé is a supporter of the queen. A memory of her uncle's menacing grin flashes before her eyes. The Duke confirms her fiancé is the topic he wished to discuss. With arms crossed, he declares that they need to prepare for the worst. He advises her to reconsider her position and vows to investigate her mysterious fiancé. From across the spacious room, Claris quietly thanks him for his help. Changing the subject, the Duke continues his thoughts while sipping his tea. Claris looks up, startled by the sudden shift in conversation. He begins to explain that Theo and Eric were very unstable after their parents' death. From their hiding spot, Rusty and the children listen in with interest. The Duke reflects on his own shortcomings, admitting he knows little outside the battlefield. A memory of his younger self and a small Eric surfaces as he admits that without her, his relationship with Eric might have been broken beyond repair. Looking at the back of a young boy's head, he smiles softly, realizing how things have changed. He looks directly at a stunned Claris, telling her, "It's all thanks to you." The moment hangs in the air, focusing on Claris's trembling hands. Surrounded by a warm floral glow, the Duke gives her a genuine, gentle smile. Her eyes widen in a blush as she begins to speak. A flustered Claris nervously takes a sip of her tea. The Duke admits that he usually gets exhausted being around women. Claris looks up at him in surprise, her teacup poised midair. He continues, confessing that with her, he wants to talk more. Ah! Startled by his unexpected confession, she spills hot coffee on her hand. He stands in concern, asking if she's okay as she stammers an apology. He gently takes her hand to inspect the burn. Looking at her reddened hand, he insists she should be treated. While he holds her hand, she apologizes again, but he tells her not to worry. Claris looks at him, her thoughts racing after his kind words. The Duke gazes at her with a sincere, serious expression. A tiny, blushing Clarice tells herself he's definitely not trying to seduce her. Trying to compose herself, she compliments his skill as he treats her hand. He calmly wraps her hand, explaining that injuries are just part of the battlefield. Clarice tentatively brings up the topic of his marriage partner. While finishing the bandage, he quietly admits that he's calmed down now. Surrounded by a thorny aura, the Duke explains his life on the battlefield, and lack of social presence makes him an undesirable husband. He worries that marrying might cause succession problems for Eric, recalling a memory of the boy holding baby Theo. Looking at her, he adds that there's also Theo to consider. He concludes that marriage wouldn't help anyone, as a memory of Eric hugging Theo appears. With his back turned, he makes a firm declaration. He's decided never to marry. Clarice looks at him, taking in his resolute words. He turns back, telling her that she truly values the people around her. He continues, noting her desire for him to find a kind partner for the sake of the family. With a playful glint in her eye, Clarice suggests someone kind, or perhaps with blonde hair. She offers him a soft, understanding smile. Clarice explains that her wish is simply for everyone to be happy. A warm, genuine smile lights up her face. The Duke is visibly taken aback by her heartfelt wish. She insists that a wonderful person suits him for his own sake, not for the house or family. He continues to hold her bandaged hand as she speaks. His fingers gently shift, intertwining with hers. Calling her name, Clarice, he holds her hand tightly. They share a deep, meaningful look, holding each other's gaze. He looks down at their joined hands, thoughtfully repeating her name before continuing. And you crash. The eavesdropping children, Rusty and William, all tumble out from their hiding spot, stunning the Duke as he realizes they heard everything. In a comedic pile, the group begs for forgiveness. The Duke glares disapprovingly at Rusty, who was supposed to be watching them. The Duke and Clarice stand together, both startled by the sudden interruption. The Duke vows to be more careful, as Clarice asks if that's all he wanted to discuss. Flustered and blushing, Clarice excuses herself to leave. The Duke silently watches her walk away down the long hall. Rusty approaches, asking if his conversation is really finished. The Duke stares after Clarice's retreating figure, realizing he completely forgot what he was going to say. Walking away, a blushing Clarice admits to herself that she ran away. Gasp! Clarice spots the children peeking from behind a pillar, realizing they've been caught. Approaching the children, she assumes they were eavesdropping and apologizes, but William asks what she means. William looks at her seriously, stating that he has something to tell her. Eric, holding Theo, announces he must return to the palace tomorrow and will be taking Count Nocturnal with him. William tells Eric he won't see him for a while, as Clarice quietly listens and accepts the news. Interrupting their talk, Clarice appears, causing William to call out her name in surprise. With a warm smile, Clarice announces she has a request for them. She claps her hands together excitedly, asking if they're ready for her idea. Changing into pajamas, William enthusiastically suggests a farewell pajama party. Baby Theo happily clutches a stuffed dog, ready for the party. The three children share a moment of pure, excited anticipation. An elaborate spread of cakes, pies, and tea is prepared for the occasion. Eric marvels at the spread, asking if she did it herself, but Clarice admits the maids helped. Clarice smiles, feeling at ease now that the situation with her uncle is resolved. She pulls Eric and Theo into a hug, giving a surprised Eric a kiss on the cheek. A blushing Eric looks completely stunned by the unexpected affection. William watches the tender moment with a gentle, knowing smile. Pointing an accusatory finger, William reminds a flustered Eric that the Duke helped them too. Holding the children close, Clarice warmly agrees that the Duke also worked very hard. William beams, his face lit up with a happy, blushing smile. The group enjoys their time together, with Theo laughing as the others relax around him. William gently gives a sleeping Theo a taste of dessert. A flashback begins, with a shadowed woman recalling her strict upbringing as a king's child. The memory causes a pained expression to cross William's face as he clutches his chest. He's startled by a sudden sound while walking through the gardens. He asks who's there and discovers another young boy, who identifies William as the second prince and his rival. The boy explains that no one scolds him for drawing in this spot. Clenching his fist, William acknowledges their similar struggles but resolves not to lose to him. The two young rivals are shown walking away, holding hands. The other boy flashes a sweet, innocent smile. William looks down at a blank paper, his face flushed with emotion. He fondly remembers that Dick was the only one who treated him like a brother, not a prince. He recalls the sense of peace Dick's presence brought him as they spent time together. Back in the memory, William looks up from his paper, puzzled by a hand offering him a statue. Learning Dick made the cherub statue, William is stunned by his friend's desire to create a better country for people like him. Dick gently pats William's head, declaring his ambition to become king. Surrounded by flowers, Dick gives a pure and heartfelt smile. Back at the party, a sudden, loud growl from someone's stomach startles Eric and Claris. William laughs as Claris apologizes to a confused Theo for the noise, much to Eric's annoyance. The room fills with shared, joyful laughter between Claris and the children. After the party, William stands alone in a vast hall, looking up at the high ceilings. He suddenly lets out a cry of frustration and anguish. Eric watches his friend's outburst with a look of shock and concern. Later, Claris asks Eric if the Duke said anything after the eavesdropping incident, but Eric assures her he didn't. Eric stands before the Duke and formally requests to accompany Prince William. The Duke looks down with a serious, unreadable expression. With unwavering determination, Eric affirms his request with a firm yes. The Duke continues to gaze at the boy, considering his plea. Eric stands resolute, his small fists clenched at his sides. The Duke's stern expression softens into a subtle, approving smile. Seeing the change, Eric's face lights up with hope and excitement. Eric looks slightly shy as William stands beside him with a supportive smile. Looking up at the Duke, Eric begins to add another thought. William beams at his friend, sincerely thanking Eric for his decision. William suddenly grabs Eric's hand. He pulls a startled Eric into a tight hug from behind. Blushing, Eric is completely stunned by the unexpected embrace. William beams, vowing to make their friendship even stronger. The Duke announces he has no intention of opposing Eric's decision, as William peeks from behind his aide. He then declares that the ducal family shall now serve as Crown Prince William's shield. Startled by the sudden vow, William and his aide look on as the Duke adds a condition. With a menacing glare, the Duke warns that if William proves unworthy, that shield will turn against him. William's aide flinches, shocked by the gravity of the Duke's threat. Accepting the terms, William states it's yet to be seen if the House of Vanderlick can truly be his shield. He looks on with bright, determined eyes, ready for the challenge. With a confident gaze upward, he says that he looks forward to it. A grand royal carriage awaits William's departure, flanked by guards. A royal official with glasses waits patiently by the carriage. Gulp, Claris, and Eric watch the procession, with Claris thinking how incredible William is. William turns back with a final, cheerful farewell to Eric. The carriage departs, rolling through the estate's massive gates. From a distance, a group of people wave goodbye. The household staff cheers and waves, sending him off warmly. From the carriage window, William waves back with a gentle smile. Claris and Eric watch the carriage leave, and she admits she's shocked. She smiles down at a pouting Eric, agreeing with his unspoken sentiment. Her expression softens into a warm, knowing smile. The royal carriage continues on its journey down the road. Inside, an aide named Basil furiously scolds William for how worried he made everyone. Identified as Basil Barrington, he reminds William that the Duke's intervention saved his life. William calmly retorts that he was only in danger because of the second prince's faction. He laughs softly, much to Basil's visible frustration. As Basil complains to the official, William defends the man, saying it wasn't his fault. William explains he personally asked his father to let him go, pretending to inspect the realm. In a memory, William and the official stand before the king as he explains the man was only his escort. Basil presses further, asking why he would go so far as to disguise himself. He looks at the prince seriously, insisting there must have been a reason. William smiles cryptically, promising to tell him later after he speaks with his mother. Basil calls his name, shifting his tone to speak not as an aide, but as something else. William panics, suddenly terrified that his mother is truly angry with him. Basil leans in and playfully pokes his chin, menacingly hoping to see his cousin again. The scene shifts to a magnificent sunlit palace. Inside, a woman with orange hair calmly listens to a maid's report. The orange-haired woman looks on with a thoughtful, serious expression. The grand palace stands under a clear blue sky. William and Basil stand before the woman, who sits at a large, ornate desk. Addressing his mother, Beatrice Barrington, the royal concubine, William stands before her. Beatrice gives a sly smile, confirming he went out secretly despite knowing it was reckless. Looking down guiltily, William quietly admits that he did. His mother dismisses it as a rebellious phase, but adds that she wouldn't mind if he were an ordinary prince. She reminds him of his heavy burden, asking if he understands what it means to be the crown prince. He explains his reason for leaving was to see the nobles' true faces, which piques her curiosity. He states that, as the crown prince, he would only be met with fake smiles and false loyalty. Surrounded by images of masked figures, he concludes that true trust can never be born from pretense. William states that he is just like Basil and his mother. A split panel shows a tense stare-down between William and his mother, Beatrice. A close-up on Beatrice's sharp, calculating red eye. She asks about the eldest son of House Vanderlick, and William nervously confirms. Beatrice notes that the Duke's support is a huge step in the succession battle, as William realizes she already knows everything. She looks up from her papers, adding that this is only true if nothing goes wrong. Beatrice warns William to remember that a single action of his could jeopardize everything. From an empty, sunlit room, his voice promises to remember her words well. The scene shifts back to the grand ducal estate. In his crib, baby Theo sleeps peacefully with a stuffed animal. Claris watches over the sleeping infant with a gentle expression. A finger gently pokes Theo's chubby cheek as he sleeps. Standing by a window, Clarice realizes with a sigh that only 1 week remains until her contract ends. She and the Duke sit opposite each other in a formal drawing room. The Duke explains that regarding her uncle, the assassination attempt will likely be treated as if it never happened. Clarice understands, realizing William's faction doesn't want an all-out confrontation with the Queen. The Duke adds that if he were to help her uncle, it would become difficult to help her. As Claris worries about her uncle's crimes, the Duke explains he will be judged as a usurper who illegally seized a noble title. He continues, stating her uncle will be expelled from the family, and the title will be returned to its true owner, you. Shocked, Clarice clutches her chest, wondering if she can truly follow in her parents' footsteps. The Duke smiles gently, reassuring her that everything from that family is rightfully hers. Tears well up in Clarice's eyes, touched by his words. She stands before him, hands clasped, overwhelmed with emotion. A memory flashes of the masked Duke holding her close at a ball. Back in the present, the Duke watches her with a soft, knowing smile. He begins to mention suspicious matters about the inheritance, but then pauses, deciding against it. He thinks to himself that now is not the right time to tell her. The Duke stands with his arms crossed, his expression firm and resolute. The scene returns to Claris, standing quietly by Theo's crib. A happy memory shows a young Eric helping a toddling Theo take his first steps. Clarice thinks wistfully that she was going to ask if she could stay a little longer. She scolds herself, realizing she must fulfill her duties as Countess Nocturnal and stop being childish. With new resolve, she declares she can't let the royal family oversee her house as Theo stirs in his sleep. A hand gently adjusts the blue gem on the sleeping baby's bracelet. Light streams through the arched windows of a magnificent, empty hall. Clarice walks wearily through the long, quiet corridor. A young maid tells Clarice she looks pale and should rest, prompting Clarice to decide she needs some fresh air. From a high balcony, she looks down into a large training hall below. She spots a panting Eric and wonders why he's still up, rushing down to see him. The man warns a hooded Eric he'll be scolded if caught, but Eric complains he still can't use magic properly. The man tells him not to be tense, but Eric frustratedly replies that he can't use a sword. Eric's eyes light up with determination, as he says he wants to make up for it with magic. Clarice watches them from the doorway, her expression somber. Her eyes widen in dawning horror as she puts the pieces together. No way. The shocking thought hits her. He's going to the battlefield. Watching from afar, she overhears Eric tell the man he wants to be useful in the next battle. Huh? She processes his words in utter disbelief, thinking he's going to war. She runs forward, demanding to know what they mean, startling both the blonde man and Eric. Eric feigns confusion, asking what she is talking about. Clarice sternly confronts the blonde-haired man, asking for Lord Rusty. Rusty reveals that Lord Eric is scheduled for his first campaign, as a shocked Clarice yells his name. Rusty tells Eric that this is something he can't keep hidden from her. Holding his arm, Clarice insists it's far too soon to send him into battle. Eric argues that the Grand Duke himself first went to war around his age. A memory of the Duke confirms he also accompanied the battlefield at that age, shocking Claris. Stuttering, Clarice is left speechless and visibly distressed by the revelation. Rusty explains that for the succession, the king must officially marry William's mother, the consort. Clarice realizes that if that happens, the queen consort, the second prince's mother, will not stay silent. The narration explains the queen consort came for peace, and if the promise is broken, her homeland will return to hostility. Clarice tearfully asks why Lord Eric must also be involved in the potential conflict. In a flashback, the Duke asks a young Eric if he understands his decision, to which the boy firmly answers yes. Clarice realizes with a start that this is all connected to his decision back then. Eric explains that while he can't reveal the reason, that experience only strengthened his resolve to support Prince William. He speaks with determination, leaving Clarice looking on with surprise and admiration. He passionately declares that the prince is not just some friend. Kneeling before him, Clarice gently takes Eric's hands with a look of deep understanding. From the balcony, Clarice holds baby Theo and watches Eric practicing with dark magic below. As baby Theo nuzzles her, she looks down with a puzzled expression. She reflects on the kind Lord Eric going to a battlefield of fire and crossed swords. Rusty calls out to Lady Clarice, saying her timing is perfect as Theo happily reaches for her. Rusty presents a document regarding the contract, asking to borrow the Grand Duke for the court after the inheritance, which Clarice approves. As she accepts the document, Rusty takes the baby from her arms. Clarice clutches a red pendant, thinking that Lord Eric has always been the one to protect her. A harrowing memory flashes of another woman screaming as she and Clarice are caught in a magical blast. Clutching the pendant, she resolves to protect him this time but wonders how she can. Her thoughts are interrupted by the sight of a bruised and weakened Eric kneeling on the floor. As she rushes to his side, Rusty explains that using unique magic is more draining, a term Clarice repeats in thought. Rusty adds that even Lord Theo nearly died from it, as the baby looks on with wide, innocent eyes. The scene transitions to the castle walls under a starry sky the following night. Eric is in the training hall, panting as he practices magic alone against dummies. Ha! He clutches his chest, realizing his mana is already gone. Pushing himself, he vows to try just once more, unleashing a final spark of dark energy. The magic backfires, causing him to collapse in agony. Clarice rushes forward, catching the collapsing Eric in her arms. She cries out his name in alarm as he looks up at her, dazed and exhausted. A warm memory surfaces of a blonde woman, his mother, lovingly kissing his cheek. In the present, Eric rests weakly in Clarice's embrace. She explains she researched their family's unique magic and found past cases similar to his condition. With a radiant smile, Clarice announces that she can now help him practice his magic safely. She touches her blushing face, feeling a wave of shy pride. Eric gently touches her cheek, asking if she stayed up all night, while she nervously insists she's fine. He thanks her with a soft kiss on the cheek. The gesture leaves Clarice stunned and blushing, while a shy Eric looks away. Setting some new rules, she tells Eric they will only practice for a set time each day, and he reluctantly agrees. Eric insists that the one who stayed up all night must rest now, firmly telling her to do it. From a high balcony, the Duke watches Clarice and Eric practicing together below. He observes them, noting that Clarice has been invited as well and that they have no choice but to go. Clarice smiles warmly, her hair tied back neatly. Eric unleashes a torrent of dark magic as Clarice's voice praises his amazing power. An excited Eric celebrates as Clarice applauds, declaring that he has now mastered full control. 2 weeks pass in a montage of their training, with Clarice noting Lord Eric's remarkable progress. Clarice tells a nervous Eric that Lord Albert will see his training results today, encouraging him to do his best. Waiting in the training hall, Clarice wonders why he hasn't arrived yet. She looks around with growing concern. The Duke arrives with a maid holding baby Theo, and Clarice informs them that Lord Eric is missing. Finding his room empty, she realizes he is not there. The scene shifts to a large, sunlit library. Clarice enters the empty library, confirming he's not there either. As she wonders where he could be, the Duke calls her name from behind. The Duke confirms that they haven't been able to find him either. He speculates that Eric might be feeling down about her impending departure. The Duke reminds her she returns to her territory tomorrow, leaving Clarice stunned. All baby Theo coos, looking over at the shocked Clarice. She takes the baby into her arms, and he snuggles against her contentedly. Cradling Theo, she whispers his name with a fond expression. She wonders if Lord Eric feels the same sadness about her leaving as she does. In a quiet garden, Eric sits huddled alone by a large tree. He peers out from a balcony, his expression forlorn. Claris finds him in the garden, saying she was right to check there. He asks how she knew where to find him, and she reminds him it's where they first spoke. As he asks if she still remembers, she smiles, saying she couldn't forget him jumping out a window. A blushing Eric looks away, flustered by the memory. She kneels down to talk to the pouting boy. Claris explains she's leaving tomorrow and wanted to spend her last moments with him. She gently reaches her hand out toward him. He angrily slaps her hand away, shouting that he doesn't want to talk to her. Ouch! He bites her hand in frustration, then looks shocked by his own actions, sprouting cat ears. He immediately lets go, apologizing with a guilty look. His hands hover over the bite mark on her wrist as golden light begins to glow. Claris smiles, praising how much stronger his healing magic has become. Taking his hands in hers, she tells him she truly admires him. A montage shows their journey together as she praises his constant effort to improve. Eric stares at her, his red eyes wide and speechless. He gently takes her arm, looking at a faint scar. Pointing to the scar, he recalls a time when he couldn't use his healing magic properly. A flashback shows a younger Eric desperately trying to heal her injured arm. He confesses that he trained his magic so hard not just for the prince, but so he wouldn't make her worry. Huh? Claris looks down, taken aback by his reason. He clenches his fists, admitting he wanted to prove he wasn't a coward and have her see him as strong. Crying, he repeats that he didn't want to make her worry as she looks on with deep sympathy. A memory of his happy family, father, mother, and Theo, flashes by as he laments his efforts. He breaks down in tears, overwhelmed with emotion. He tearfully confesses he wanted to be strong enough to hold her and say, "I did it," touching her deeply. He throws himself into her arms, sobbing that she gave him everything when he had nothing. Hugging her tightly, he pleads for her to stay. He buries his face in her shoulder, whispering, "Don't leave me." Overcome with emotion, Claris cries as she holds him, whispering his name in comfort. The Duke stands sternly before Claris and a timid Eric. Claris steps forward to address the Duke, shielding a nervous Eric behind her. The Duke admonishes his son, stating a man shouldn't cry or cling to a woman. His harsh words bring fresh tears to Eric's eyes. Softening, the Duke gently pats Eric's head, telling him to protect her, not hold her back. He explains he must go to the palace tomorrow, summoned by the king's concubine, as Eric wipes his tears. He then commands a surprised Claris to accompany him. The Duke explains their visit is related to the succession of the title. He warns that the queen's faction will likely make a move, alarming a teary-eyed Eric. As he prepares to leave, the Duke tasks Eric with looking after Claris in his absence. "You can do that, right?" he asks, and Eric looks up with newfound determination. The Duke kneels to meet his son's gaze, sharing a quiet, meaningful moment. Claris watches them, a warm and knowing smile gracing her lips. The scene shifts to the grand and sprawling consort's residence. Dressed in formal attire, the Duke leads Claris and Eric through the palace. They enter a lavish room, greeted by an orange-haired woman and a blonde boy. The woman and the boy, presumably the consort and prince, stand together regally. The consort formally greets Countess Claris Nocturnal, mentioning her son has spoken of her. The consort and the Duke stand face to face in the sunlit room. She greets him with a familiar smile, calling him Duke Al. Both Claris and Eric are stunned by her casual use of the Duke's first name. The consort simply says, "It's been a while." The two families sit together for tea, a formal but tense atmosphere between them. The consort assures them they can relax, as only trusted people are present. Claris and Eric exchange a wide-eyed, shocked glance. They realize with a jolt that the Duke and the consort must be childhood friends. A profile reveals the consort is Prince William's mother, a wise and magically skilled woman from the powerful Barrington family. The consort teases the Duke, saying his face is as intimidating as ever. She asks him to look friendlier, but he curtly replies that it's the face he was born with. The consort concedes defeat for now, deciding to hear his story later. She turns to Claris, asking her to introduce herself first. The consort notes she heard Claris was once a caretaker at a different Duke's residence. With a knowing smirk, she asks Claris if she found what she was looking for there. Claris says she recovered the magic stone, but the consort presses, asking if that's all. The consort's gaze sharpens, her expression turning serious. She accuses Claris of truly wanting a connection with the Duke's family, not the stone, leaving her speechless. The consort smiles, sensing she's hit a nerve. Flustered, Claris stammers a denial. thinking the woman is even more frightening than her reputation suggests. The consort smiles warmly, saying she only wanted to offer her support. The Duke and Eric remain silent as the conversation unfolds. The consort explains she needed to be cautious due to Clarisse's blood ties to Count Nocturnal. The consort's sharp eyes narrow as she waits for Clarisse's response. Clarisse feels the unspoken challenge, "Show me who you really are." The consort crosses her arms, waiting patiently for an answer. Clarisse laments her own naivete, realizing she caused trouble for the Duke's family. The consort coolly states that she isn't someone who can live up to such expectations. Clarisse is left stunned and silent by the unexpected response. She thinks of what is truly valuable: the Duke, Eric, and baby Theodore together. Clarisse declares her sole purpose is to protect them and do everything she can for their sake. The Duke interrupts the consort, decisively stating, "That's enough." The Duke stands protectively before Clarisse, telling someone to stop testing her. Clarisse looks up at him with a grateful expression, whispering his title. The orange-haired consort looks on in surprise, her thoughts trailing off. Gasp realization dawns on the consort as she thinks that Clarisse is an extraordinary woman. Young Eric passionately declares that he will marry Clarisse and make her happy. His bold declaration leaves the consort, William, the Duke, and Clarisse all stunned. "Ah," young Eric blushes, suddenly flustered by his own outburst. A smirking William watches as a mortified Eric sprouts cat ears in his embarrassment. Looking at the Duke, Clarisse blushes and thinks fondly of Lord Eric's words. The Duke ends the conversation, telling the consort there's nothing more to discuss. The consort recalls once asking the Duke if Clarisse had rejected him, which he nervously denied. She directly asks Clarisse what kind of relationship she has with the Duke. The consort reflects that while she doesn't know who is pursuing him, Al has always rejected many marriage proposals in the past. She turns to him, pointedly asking if that's not right. Clarisse looks at the silent Duke, wondering if he really receives marriage proposals. The Duke looks away, beginning to speak with reservation. He firmly states that the matter has nothing to do with Clarisse, shocking her. The consort acknowledges his statement while looking at Clarisse. Young Eric interrupts, suggesting they discuss the matter in more detail. The consort dismisses William, telling him to escort the guests out so she can speak privately with Al. The Duke watches with a somber expression as Clarisse and young Eric depart. The scene transitions to a bright, sunlit terrace with a tea set. As Clarisse sips her tea, young Eric asks if she's all right. Clarisse sits at an outdoor table, having tea with both young Eric and William. William apologizes for his mother's strictness, but Clarisse says it's understandable for a consort. Remembering how the Duke defended her, Clarisse realizes he was trying to protect her. Clutching her dress, she sadly wonders why he would do that. She sits alone, a solitary figure lost in thought. From a window above, the consort watches the three having tea in the garden. She tells the Duke that if he'd been born a woman, he would have been William's fiancé. The Duke coldly refuses any connection with her, prompting a pout from the consort. She remarks that he hasn't changed, mentioning something she heard from William. The Duke looks genuinely confused, asking what she means. The consort questions his obliviousness as he remains puzzled. Looking out the window, she muses that ignorance is bliss, and some things are better left unnoticed. She affirms her own thought, deciding it's for the best. Turning back, she asks the Duke if he intends to accept it. A brief, happy memory shows Clarisse smiling warmly at young Eric during tea. The Duke admits that, while he never intends to marry, he can't easily refuse this time. The scene shifts to a grand mansion under a bright blue sky. Young Eric and Clarisse appear side by side, both looking surprised. William explains a royal tradition of a study group for prospective attendants and key figures. He continues, explaining that they are currently in the process of selecting members. Looking at Eric, William warmly invites him to join the study group. Young Eric is visibly surprised by the sudden invitation. William excitedly grabs a flustered Eric, declaring he's counting on him. Clarisse watches the boys with a fond smile, thinking that their friendship is fine. Her expression turns thoughtful as she considers something. She wonders if the Duke and consort's childhood friendship means they were in a similar study group. The scene transitions to a lavish, golden-hued palace hallway. Clarisse thanks a man with glasses after settling her affairs. As she reaches a grand door, a voice calls out her name. Eric runs to her, asking if her inheritance went well, and she confirms. He smiles, gently warning her about the dangers of the palace. A hand reaches out towards a surprised Claris. He gestures gallantly for her to follow him. The scene shifts to an elegant, sunlit palace corridor. Taking her hand, Eric confidently leads her down the hall. He suddenly stops, a tense look on his face. Claris asks him to wait as he stares ahead, puzzled. A group of young nobles confronts Eric, calling him an arrogant brat. Peeking from behind a column, Claris wonders about the commotion. The lead bully shoves a small girl, shouting for her to back off. Gasps. Claris lunges forward, shouting a warning. With concern, Claris asks the child if she is okay. Claris is struck by how adorable the young girl is. She admires the girl's perfect features, thinking she's like a living doll. Snapping out of it, Claris realizes this isn't the time for admiration. The bullies turn on Claris, demanding to know who she is. Surprised, Claris realizes they must be from the Marquis family. HMPH. The three boys scoff with disdain. Claris declares the girl is under her protection, while Eric warns them not to be rough. The lead bully scoffs at their arrogance in front of the Marquis family. The Duke's shadow looms behind Eric as he reveals he's from the Vanderlick ducal family, smugly asking if they want to challenge Duke Albert. The bully pales, recalling rumors of the terrifying, battle-hardened Vanderlick Duke. Yeah, the terrified boy Leopold flees, screaming that he doesn't want to die. Eric scoffs as the little girl thanks him, calling him amazing. Eric smiles kindly, apologizing for the trouble she went through. She explains the boys thought she was arrogant, prompting Claris to wonder about a study group. Eric questions the girl, who nervously confirms his suspicions. Pondering the situation, Eric strokes his chin thoughtfully. The girl explains the current political situation within the palace. A grand, ornate mansion is shown. A narrative explains that high-ranking children are gathering to join an exclusive study group with the princes, chosen by status and compatibility. Claris reacts with surprise to this new information. The young girl reflects on the custom of child marriages among nobility. She nervously clutches her dress, doubting her ability to help the prince. Her expression firms as she resolves to fulfill her duty as his companion. Claris is deeply moved, thinking what a kind child she is. She takes the girl's hands, offering a warm smile of encouragement. With a gentle smile, the girl agrees to his proposal. Eric and the young girl seal their new friendship with a handshake. Claris worries about a marriage for such a young girl, imagining her suitor as a scumbag she'd like to beat up. The Duke's voice welcomes Claris back. The Duke stands before her, a powerful and imposing figure. Claris explains she is accompanying the young girl. The young girl curtsies, offering her greetings to Duke Vanderlick. She formally introduces herself as Celestine Caldy. Both Claris and young Eric stare in absolute shock. A stunning realization hits them. She is his fiancée. Standing before the Duke, Claris and Eric are still reeling from the news. The unbelievable thought echoes again. She's his fiancée? Celestine stands quietly, a picture of youthful grace. The Duke recognizes her name, realizing who she is. Claris smirks, recalling the bully's fear and thinking she didn't expect the dreaded Duke to be Albert. With a sharp smile, Claris asks the Duke about his acquaintance with the lovely lady. He tries to explain, but she coldly accepts that engagements are a noble's duty. The Duke clarifies that Marquis Caldy likely sent her to convey his regards. Surprised, Celestine says she was unaware of that, as Eric ponders. Eric points to himself, wondering about his new role. He innocently asks if he should call Lady Celestine Stepmother. Shocking everyone, Celestine asks if Eric is his son, and Claris realizes the stepson-stepmother dynamic with a weary sigh. Claris theatrically pleads with the Duke not to make the child fulfill her duties, prompting his flustered denial. The Duke grabs Claris's wrist, his expression suddenly serious. Holding her arm, he tells her there's no need for her antics. Claris declares the matter is no longer her concern, a statement that visibly wounds the Duke. She immediately regrets her words, thinking she didn't mean to say that aloud. A tense silence hangs between Claris and the Duke. Claris advises the Duke to first share his intentions with Celestine. The Duke states the engagement isn't final and that he will inform her later. He turns away, telling them to avoid contact until an official announcement. The Duke leads a hesitant Celestine toward a door, leaving Claris behind. As they leave, Celestine looks back with a slight gasp. Celestine clutches a letter while standing beside a stoic Claris. A young blonde boy in a white and red uniform appears. Claris greets William, as Celestine and Eric recognize him as the prince. The four have tea in a garden, where William reveals it's his secret spot. William theorizes the engagement is a result of his friendship with Eric. A confused Eric explains his family's duty to protect the kingdom. William clarifies that Eric wasn't supposed to support him, since he isn't the heir. He explains Celestine's engagement is a political move to show fairness to both his and Dick's factions. Eric is speechless at the political revelation. Celestine reassures Eric, saying she's lucky to marry the Duke. She vows to give birth to a healthy heir, shocking the table and making Clarice worry about succession issues. Worried about her duties, Celestine is told by William not to overthink it. William bluntly states she's only becoming his wife symbolically, shocking Celestine. He quickly backpedals as Eric tells him to be quiet. With a deceptively sweet smile, Clarice asks to have a word with William. Clarice now sits with Celestine, who nervously agrees to listen. The young girl looks up at Clarice, utterly confused. Clarice gently reassures her that the Duke will value her feelings. She confidently tells Celestine that the Duke will surely address the engagement. Celestine looks up, surprised by Clarice's conviction. She recalls the Duke's kindness, but sadly accepts that nobles cannot love freely. Clasping her hands, she resigns herself to her duty, marrying for her family and bearing an heir. Eric, William, and Clarice listen quietly as Celestine shares her thoughts. Clarice's expression is serious as she thinks, but a young girl in a purple dress nervously clasps her hands. Clarice offers the girl a kind, reassuring smile. The dark-haired girl looks up, flustered and confused. Clarice gently takes her hand, apologizing for not introducing herself sooner. Framed by flowers, Clarice confidently promises to be the girl's strength. The girl gasps, shocked to learn Clarice is a countess. Clarice formally greets the girl, who shyly admits she thinks Clarice is cool. The girl sits at a tea table between a silent Eric and Prince William. Prince William and Eric both offer her a warm, welcoming smile. Overwhelmed by their kindness, she looks down, thinking of everyone. Her heart pounds as she wonders if she's allowed to show her true feelings. Clarice watches the scene unfold with a gentle, knowing smile. The girl recalls hearing her father and mother were incompetent, duty-shirking nobles. She continues, explaining they acted selfishly out of love. She recounts how her father remarried a stepmother from a prestigious family. Eric lets out a small gasp, surprised by her story. Clarice asks if the family crest handkerchief is for her fiancé. The girl confirms. She reveals her confined mother secretly did embroidery, impressing a younger Clarice. Smiling fondly, she recalls her mother's dream for her future. A flashback shows her happily learning to embroider with her purple-haired mother. Clarice understands, realizing that's why the girl loves embroidery too. The girl agrees, proudly adding she secretly adjusted her own dress. She flusters, promising to stop once married as per her wifely duties. Clarice can't help but let out a bright, cheerful laugh. The girl looks up, surprised by her warm reaction. With a happy giggle, she says Clarice is the first person besides her mother to say that. Clarice looks on with a soft, deeply empathetic expression. Overcome with emotion, the girl's eyes fill with grateful tears. Clarice realizes how much the memories of her late mother sustain the girl. The thought triggers a warm memory of Clarice's own childhood with her mother. An unfinished embroidery symbolizes a cherished bond and a silent promise. Later, the Duke begins to apologize to Clarice in a quiet room. Clarice bows her head slightly, looking troubled. The Duke takes responsibility, admitting he chose his words poorly. As he apologizes, Clarice insists that she should be the one saying sorry. He states that regarding Celestine, he feels it's not the best course of action. Clarice listens, quietly acknowledging his words. She realizes undoing the engagement is difficult as the Duke asks if it still bothers her. The Duke looks away, apologizing for overstepping his bounds. Clarice clenches her fists, stating her desire to help girls forced into marriage. She recalls a bitter memory of her family celebrating their wealth at her expense. With renewed resolve, Clarice begins to state her intention. The Duke admits that, thanks to her, he was able to make his wish come true. Clarice smiles gently, adding that it was granted to someone else. The Duke gazes forward with a determined, unwavering expression. He turns to her with a slight smile, promising to do whatever he can. He seriously offers to destroy the Marquis's family, prompting a horrified Clarice to shout that it's not allowed. Clarice looks up with sudden inspiration, ready to propose her own plan. The scene shifts to a grand, sunlit hall centered around a massive tree. William leads Eric into the garden, musing that this is where Celestine met her lover. He suggests they investigate while Clarice is away. He recalls that Celestine's lover had black hair and red eyes, glancing at Eric before asking about his cloak. William explains he needs a disguise, as it would be bad if he and Lady Celestine were seen together. He pulls the dark, lace-trimmed hood over his blonde hair. Ta-da! William reveals a new, older appearance, explaining his family's transformation artifact can change his entire look. Now disguised, William says no one will notice him, though the artifact's high magic consumption limits its use. Eric puzzles over the details. A transformation artifact, a garden, and a man with black hair. A sudden realization seems to dawn on someone. A voice calls out his name, causing Eric to blush in shocked recognition. The scene transitions to a sunlit, vine-covered conservatory. A silver-haired woman stands serenely in the garden. She spots Celestine being confronted by the brown-haired boy from before. The boy introduces himself as the Marquis's heir, prompting the woman to realize they are half-siblings. He cruelly tells his sister that someone as useless as her will be cast aside. He begins to insult her mother, causing the young girl to flinch in pain. The silver-haired woman intervenes, warning him that some things should never be said, even in a quarrel. She places a supportive hand on his arm, declaring herself a fan of his sister. She astutely guesses his harsh words come from a fear that his sister will be neglected. As he tries to bring up their mother again, the woman calmly leads the young girl away. She reassures the girl that with her skill, owning a dress atelier is an achievable dream, surprising her. The boy sputters that women can't act so freely and the Grand Duke would never approve. The woman counters with the Duke's own words, stating he'd be delighted for Celestine to develop the region, and even offers a business proposal for their local silk. The woman winks, telling the girl the Duke has already approved and encouraging her to pursue what she truly wants. She flashes back to a happy memory of showing a design to her loving mother. Tears of hope stream down her face as she asks if she really doesn't have to give up. The silver-haired woman offers a gentle, comforting touch to the crying girl. Stop right there. An elegantly dressed man strides past the shocked Marquis heir. A handsome, black-haired young man in a formal uniform makes a grand entrance. A special Halloween illustration shows two chibi characters ready to trick-or-treat. The transformed Eric stands protectively before Celestine's half-brother. His crimson eyes glare with cold intensity. The flustered brother demands to know who this mysterious man is. Celestine gasps, recognizing the man from a previous encounter. As Claris wonders what's happening, William explains it's a magic tool. He pulls down his own hood, demonstrating the transformation. William winks, revealing his true identity to a very surprised Claris. The transformed Eric's thoughts reveal that he was the man from before. A promotional image shows the transformed Eric and William posing elegantly. The transformed Eric stands resolute, a shadow of his younger self behind him. The Marquis heir remains utterly confused by the situation. Transformed Eric stands with his hands on his hips, ready to speak. The brother erupts in a blushing fury, demanding to know what nonsense he's talking about. Eric calmly observes that for someone who claims to hate his sister, he doesn't seem very hostile. A thought bubble suggests his bullying is just how he shows affection, punctuated by a fist bonking his head. Urgh. Overcome with embarrassment, the boy collapses to the ground. He looks up, flustered, as his sister watches with a curious expression. Shouting for them to stop their baseless accusations, he flees in embarrassment. The brown-haired boy looks on in shock as the silver-haired woman walks away. The silver-haired woman turns back with a warm smile, looking at the sweating boy. The silver-haired woman and the brown-haired boy sit together on a sunlit bench. Looking toward the others, she muses that the situation must be confusing for him. The boy explains that although Celestine is a good girl, his mother considers her a shame who needs discipline. He admits he was told to be strict, but the woman warns him that Celestine will only grow to hate him. He leaps up, protesting that he acts for her sake, but she calmly states that no one likes being yelled at. With a bright smile, the silver-haired woman offers to teach him a better way. Following her advice, the boy stands awkwardly before awaiting Celestine. He looks down remorsefully, admitting he has been awful to her. He explains he just didn't want their mother scolding her over the study meeting, leading Celestine to a sudden realization. Celestine beams, thanking her brother and calling him Leo. Ta-ah. Flustered Leo runs off, warning her to be careful because their mother will hit her if he isn't number one. Claris watches him leave, proudly noting that he finally expressed his true feelings. Leo asks if he can call her his mentor, saying he's never seen his sister smile like that before, surprising Claris. He looks up at her with wide, hopeful eyes, asking if he really can. Ta, he runs off once more, entrusting his new mentor to look after his sister. William approaches a pensive Eric, glad it all worked out. As Eric wonders about the term mentor, William asks how Eric figured things out too, leaving him looking utterly confused. Eric blushes, thinking about the beautiful older sister who recently appeared at their home. Eric and Celestine now face each other in a quiet moment. Gasp! A realization dawns on Celestine as she looks at Claris, beginning to stammer an explanation. The scene returns to the four of them sitting at the garden table. Celestine explains that she got lost at the pre-debutante party and Lord Eric helped her. In a flashback, a cloaked Eric kneels gallantly, offering to lead the lost girl. The younger Celestine looks up at the kind, cloaked young man. Celestine recounts how it was her first event with the Marquise family and she was terrified. She finishes by saying she wanted to thank him properly for his kindness that day. William and Claris praise Eric for being so cool, making him blush with embarrassment. Eric looks away, admitting that a lot happened after that day. Claris's memories of that time seem fuzzy, and she asks if it involves his parents. A tragic image flashes of young Eric standing over two bodies on the floor. Celestine quickly says no, understanding he must have his own circumstances. Celestine and Eric sit in an awkward silence across the table. William cheerfully suggests that Lady Celestine get engaged to Eric instead of the Duke. He reasons an engagement between children is much simpler, leaving Eric and Celestine shocked. Gata! William observes that despite Eric's flustered reaction, he doesn't seem to dislike the idea. Celestine blushes as she considers a future with Lord Eric. Claris watches the two of them with a warm, knowing smile. Celestine stands, boldly declaring that she will definitely make him fall for her one day. She earnestly asks for a chance, stunning a wide-eyed Eric. She quickly adds that if he ever dislikes her, they can annul the engagement right away. She blushes, waiting nervously for his answer. Taking charge, Eric says the whole thing was his fault and that he'll take responsibility. With a gentle smile, Eric extends his hand to her. Celestine's face lights up with pure joy as she happily accepts. A red-haired woman watches from a window as Eric and Celestine hold hands, with Claris looking on. Claris smiles to herself, thinking that the young girl is truly interesting. The red-haired Marquise smiles smugly as a maid bows respectfully behind her. Gosh, Claris is startled to see the Duke in full armor, asking if he's going to battle. He states he's off to talk with the Marquis.